Good evening and welcome to the April 8th, 2026 Combined Select Board Finance Committee Budget Hearing for the fiscal year 2027 budget. I'll take a moment to introduce members of the Select Board.
Jamie Stebbins.
I'm Craig Barger. Tommy Fulgenetti is out of town, so he's not here tonight, so I'm the interim chair for tonight. And we could have the Finance Committee introduce yourselves for quorum purposes. Okay, if you could all join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
For which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We also have at the head table up here, Sean Dugan, the interim town administrator, Wendy Nightingale, our finance director and accountant, and Elizabeth Hagg, our executive assistant.
Okay.
So the first matter is a notice of public hearing. Jamie Stebbins will read it.
So the notice of public hearing in regards to the fiscal year 2027 budget pursuant to Article 6, subsection C6-5 of the Easton Town Code. The Easton Select Board will hold a joint public hearing with the Easton Finance Committee at Frothingham Hall, 15 Barrow Street, Easton, Mass. On April 8th, 2026 at 6 p.m. The purpose of the hearing is to hear presentations from town and school departments on their proposed FY 2027 budget. Those who cannot attend or would prefer to provide written rather than oral testimony may submit to us testimony for the record by email with the subject line Public Hearing FY 2027 Budget to ehag@easton.ma.us. If the testimony is not received by 10 a.m. the day of the hearing, the boards may not have sufficient time to consider it. Written testimony should include your full name and address that will be provided to the boards and become part of the public record of the hearing. Anonymous written comments will not be recorded or not be accorded the same weight as testimony from identifiable sources.
And unfortunately, we don't have hybrid here at the Frothingham Hall, so if you have anybody who's watching, they can email us at selectboard@easton.ma.us, and we'll be happy to respond. So the first item of business is fixed costs and enterprise funds.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I have a little presentation before that, but we'll get to fixed costs
Sure.
and afterwards. But I'll kick off the presentation. Actually, with your indulgence, I'm going to have Southeastern Regional come out of order, but we'll cover that. Okay, so good night, everyone. Good evening, everyone. At tonight's budget hearing, we're going to hear from many town departments as well as our friends at the Ames Free Library and Southeastern Regional. But before we do that, I would like to introduce our town department heads, as some of them are new. Serving as interim town administrator over the past couple of months has been infinitely easier given the crew that we have here. The knowledge and skill brought by this team is incredible, and I can't say enough about the caliber of the people that we hire here in Easton. I'm thankful for and extremely proud of the work that they do every day to serve this community, and I would like to just introduce them all and recognize them. So if you could just give me a wave when I call your name. Our finance director and town accountant, Wendy Nightingale, police chief Keith Boone, as well as deputy chief Adams is with us as well, fire chief Justin Alexander, as well as deputy chief John Carroll, health and community services director Kristen Kennedy, as well as her deputy director Tracy Levine, Human Resources Director Mary Southworth, Inspector of Buildings Kevin Greiner, Chief Assessor BJ Devereaux, Planning and Community Development Director Ken Kirkland, Treasurer Collector Diana Lambert, IT Director John Souza. Is Jeff Clunan here? Jeff Clunan, our Water Operations Manager, as well as Deputy Director Greg Swan. And not able to be with us tonight is Danielle Sicard, who is our town clerk.
Dave Field.
Oh my God, Dave Field! I'm so sorry. And Dave has the most slides tonight, so I feel like in your name.
That's because you had 50 slides. We were trying to leave you out.
Sorry about that, Dave. You're the greatest. With that, I'll go over tonight's agenda. We'll start with a brief overview of where we are with the FY27 budget, which many of you are already familiar with, given the presentations that I've given to both the Select Board and the Finance Committee already. I'll talk a bit about the operating override process again, and then we'll dive into presentations in the order that they are listed here, except we're going to take Southeastern Regional out of order to go after fixed costs. We'll leave time after each presentation for any questions you may have, and then at the end of the presentations, we'll open it up to members of the public who are here and wish to comment. And then at a future meeting of both the Finance Committee and the Select Board, you'll vote on your recommendations for the budget. I know last year we did it all in the same meeting, but there'll be separate votes on for this year. Before we dive into this year's budget, there is some important context that I want you all to remember. As we all know, last May we proposed at town meeting both a non-override and an override contingent budget, both of which passed, and subsequently the override question that was presented to voters on June 10th failed at the ballot box. In the current fiscal year, fiscal 26, we have continued to adjust levels of service to reflect the cuts that were made to accommodate that non-override budget. Now we are deep into the FY27. We've received some good news in the form of better than expected healthcare numbers, as well as lower assessments at both Southeastern Regional and Bristol Aggie. Additionally, a budget realignment for the Easton Public Schools allowed for an FY27 request that was 2.8% lower than the FY26 request, all of which has allowed us to balance our budget for the first time in a long time without using free cash or stabilization. Balancing the budget is required by law and is good news this early in the process, but this budget is not reflective of true needs. Many of our departments are running dangerously low on staff and resources, and to restore some of the positions cut, we are presenting voters with two distinct questions to restore positions in police, fire, and public works, which I'll talk about in a future slide. To help illustrate the landscape that we're in, I want to highlight some of the changes that have been made to our operation in the past year. Most notably, as of February 1st, our fire department has shifted to a private ambulance model with service provided by Brewster Ambulance. That change was not an attempted cost-saving measure. Rather, it was necessitated by cuts and resignations of existing staff to such a low level where it became a concern for public safety above all else. We are also discontinuing the town's trash and recycling program effective July 1. The cost of operating that service has gone up significantly, and we would have needed to raise the quarterly rates to $135 per quarter just to maintain that service. With a significant cost increase coupled with increasing demand on DPW staff time in the form of billing, service changes, barrel drops, barrel repairs, as well as the demand on the Treasurer Collector's Office, it no longer makes sense to provide this as a municipal service. As of last summer, we are down 20% of our staff in the Planning and Community Development Department, so we have since closed off that wing of the building at Town Hall to be by appointment only. With reduced staff capacity, appointments are the only way to ensure existing staff can work as efficiently as possible. Due to the cut of the second collections assistant in the Treasurer Collector's Office, as of last year, we also reduced the hours of the collector's window to being open to just 20 hours per week, although payments can still be dropped off and paid online. Fiscal 26 has been a particularly difficult budget year for us, and the fact that we went 20 years without an override is a testament to our community's ability to be both frugal and innovative. An override attempt in 2016 was soundly rejected by voters, sending a clear message on the expectation of tight operating budget management, which we have since carried through with. In the years since, we've saved or avoided millions in operating costs by regionalizing services in 911 dispatch through SEMREC, consolidating departments like Health and Community Services, reforming our health insurance, in-housing special education, and generating our own solar while cutting public facility electricity consumption by 20%. In terms of revenue, we were just as crafty. We constructed 3 sewer districts, which have contributed to Easton's best years of new growth to increase the tax levy without an override. All along the way, our departments and schools have accomplished a tremendous amount, providing excellent service with fewer dollars spent per capita than peer communities and districts. And this approach has served us very well for the past 20 years since our last override. The goals of the fiscal 27 budget are twofold. 1, additional cuts to service, especially following an austere fiscal 26 budget. avoid additional cuts to service, especially following an austere fiscal 26 budget, and 2, refrain from using free cash or stabilization to artificially restore recurring spending on both the town and school sides. Easton needs to match current and recurring revenue sources and not be reliant on those one-time reserves. It's a moral issue. We are not going to bring back recurring expenses cut in fiscal 26 using one-time reserves and create a cliff for next year that would result in those folks that we just hired being laid off. And this is all in an effort to move the town closer to structural balance. And the FY27 budget, without any override dollars added, does just that. The less one-time reserves we use, the less override we must the less the override must raise to restore services. And with that being said, having our fiscal 27 budget balanced at this point in time is a great thing, but I don't want to lose sight of the fact that our departments are starved and they are operating with far fewer resources than peer communities. As the years go on, our roles in public service are becoming more complex. And if you just think about the digital landscape that we're in now and the expectation of instant gratification and how that has shifted over the years and how that expectation is similarly expected of public servants, but we are doing it with minimal resources and far fewer staff. We actually have less staff now than we did in the 1990s, which is an incredible thing to think of as our jobs have become more complex. Before we talk more about FY27, I think it's helpful to know Easton's history as it relates to operating overrides. In 2006, voters approved the last operating override in Easton, which was just 1 year after approving a debt exclusion for OA and EMS. Voters in Easton have, for many decades, been very supportive of debt exclusions, which can only fund capital projects and cannot be used for operations. But operating overrides have been very rare. Unfortunately, 2 years after the last operating override in 2008, the town's revenue took a big hit when state aid, which is our second largest source of revenue behind taxes, got cut in the recession. It took 8 years for that revenue to come back to 2008 levels, and this has been a frustrating reality for our residents as they see their tax bill go up each year, yet they hear that the town claims to have revenue challenges. Those increased tax dollars have simply filled the growing gap of state aid, which once provided 25 cents of every budget dollar and now just provides 13. The town sought an operating override again in 2016 to address the revenue gap borne by the cuts to state revenue, but voters did not approve that one either, and austere operating budgets have since followed in that past decade. If we fast forward to 2024, we see costs in healthcare and other fixed costs skyrocket to levels that have crippled not just Easton's budget, but those of most municipalities across the state. Recognizing an override was before us, town meeting directed the formation of a 19-member promoting a sustainability committee, as many of you know, PACE. And given that clear message by voters, the amount and type of override that PACE recommended was $7.3 million, which was ultimately adopted by the select board and provided to voters at the ballot box. And as we all know, that failed. Given the clear message sent by voters, there was no reason to do PACE 2.0. So our budget subcommittee, which is comprised of 2 select board, 2 finance committee, and 2 school committee members, as well as the superintendent and the town administrator, they met and they started meeting early and often, starting in summer of 2025. They started meeting monthly, and there was a goal to study the FY27 budget earlier and gather feedback on a potential override. They held 3 public forums to gather community feedback, one right before special town meeting on November 10th, another on November 19th, and a third on December 10th. They conducted a survey that was very well received. We got over 1,100 responses on that, and that was just to see what type of override folks would be open to and what approach to the FY27 budget they wanted to see in terms of cuts versus override. After collecting public feedback, it was unambiguous that the community wanted the override asked to be smaller and that there needs to be additional choice. With community feedback in mind, town staff presented the select board with a menu-style override with modest requests that they voted on March 9th to place on the annual town election ballot. Question 1, as many of you know, is for public safety to hire additional police officers and firefighters, associated benefits for those employees, as well as other funds for police and fire training. That's for $1.4 million. And then question 2 is for $700,000 for funding roadway and sidewalk improvements, as well as 2 full-time DPW special equipment operators and their associated benefits. Later in this presentation, you'll hear from the chiefs and director of the DPW on what passing those override questions, should they pass, what that would mean to their operation. The menu style of override that will be before voters will show the 2 distinct questions before you, each with specific requests, and only the questions that receive the majority vote will win. We'll move on and be included as part of the budget. So depending on how the votes fall, it's possible that 0 questions pass, 1 question passes, or both of the question passes, and we'll cover the process. The first step, dissimilar to what we did last year. Last year we had town meeting first with 2 dueling budgets, a non-override budget and an override contingent budget, and then followed by the ballot vote. This year we're going with the first step as the ballot on April 28th, which will provide the 2 questions, and then whichever questions receive the majority vote will be the ones that will be included in the budget that is voted on at town meeting. So there'll be just 1 budget that is presented to voters at the annual town meeting. All right. So now I am pleased to present you the FY27 operating budget with a total budget of $117,498,105 and some freaky graphics. 108 million of which is the general fund and 9.4 million is from our enterprise fund. As I mentioned, this is going to be the order of our presentations, hopefully. And you'll see that I moved Southeastern Regional out of order, so they'll be after fixed costs. And so with that, I will turn it over to Finance Director Wendy Nightingale.
Thank you, Sean.
Just let me know when that.
Okay. Fixed costs. Fixed costs remain the central driver of the structural budget pressure that we have, making up 34% of general fund expenditures. This slide provides a summary of those fixed cost categories. The overall change of $2,780,903. It's an increase of 8%. General fund debt and interest. Next slide. Thank you. Yeah. General fund debt and interest include non-exempt debt or debt that is funded within operating revenue constraints, and non-exempt debt that is funded through a debt exclusion override. The fiscal 27 increase in this category is due to additional borrowings for the municipal facilities project as construction progresses. We have now borrowed just under $120 million, so increases going forward will be lower in this category. Employee benefits. Oh, sorry, can you go to the next slide?
Yep.
Yeah. Employee benefits and insurance consist primarily of health insurance, but also include general insurances, the pension assessment, and other categories such as the matching portion of Medicare tax. Health insurance premiums set by the state's Group Insurance Commission are now projected to be $12,005,937, which is an increase of 5.66% from fiscal 26. While this is definitely an improvement over the initial projections of 9.6%, this rate of increase still exceeds our rate of revenue growth and does remain an area of concern. Property liability and workers' compensation insurance premiums were finalized now for our insurance carrier and provided an additional net savings, which is due to our favorable loss ratios that we've experienced over the last few years. The annual pension assessment increased by $389,783, or 5.85% over fiscal 26. We are actually able to save money every year. We pay that pension assessment up front rather than 2 installments, and that saves us $124,000. And then also, this category includes a collective bargaining reserve of $100,000, which is included to cover ongoing contract negotiations and will be reallocated at subsequent town meetings as contracts are settled. The regional school assessments decreased by a combined $160,000. driven by enrollment reductions at the regional and Bristol County agricultural schools. Regional school enrollment decreased by 13 students, and the agricultural school decreased by 1 student. So as far as enterprise funds, enterprise funds are also covered in the DPW director's presentation, but we have 4 enterprise funds: water, sewer, solid waste. Sorry, that slide keeps blinking. And then we have an enterprise fund for cable access. Enterprise funds are distinct from general funds as they are user fee-based programs and services, and they're funded with services, fee-based services, rather than taxation. Fees for these programs can only be used for program costs. Can you go to the next one? This is just a summary of all the enterprise funds. The water enterprise budget reflects a significant increase of 24.71%, which is primarily driven by additional debt associated with the previously approved PFAS and water treatment facility upgrades. We recently completed a water rate study, and rates were adjusted to accommodate these costs, which should begin to level off over the next few years. And as much as these increases are, we're actually, because we started doing these projects a lot earlier, our costs are a lot lower than some other communities who are just getting started on these projects. And then also I just wanted to highlight the Solid Waste and Recycling Enterprise Fund, which has been reduced to $100,000 for next year. That program is being discontinued, and the $100,000 will cover costs associated with transitioning the program back to a private model effective July 1, 2026. And we discontinued the program due to increasing costs and growing demands on staff time, which has been further limited by recent staffing reductions. As Sean had said previously, we were looking at a significant increase in that program. Had we continued with it, we'd be looking at a fee increase of going from $100 per quarter to $135 a quarter. And that's all for enterprise funds. And at this point, I will turn it back over to Sean to discuss general government.
Oh, no, next is actually Southeastern.
Oh, sorry.
So, Holly, Mark. Just that one.
That's it.
Yeah, this is the HD.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Superintendent Holly McClendon from Southeastern, and I'm joined by Assistant Superintendent of Finance and Administration, Mark Morris. And we want to thank you for having us here this evening and thank the Town of Easton for your continued support of our school. We support 9 communities, but Easton is our hometown, and so we're very proud to represent your students and serve your students. I'm going to let Mark take the first slide for us.
So thank you. Here you'll see our FY27 budget summary. You'll see that our foundation budget, transportation of students, and other expenditures are the 3 buckets that make up our primary budget. Our foundation budget is at $40,966,418, and that's made up of state aid at $26,183,132, and local assessments of $14,783,286. The next one is regional transportation of our students. So our transportation costs for FY27 are $2,405,700. That's made up of state aid of $1,613,160, and that's the exact amount that we received. That's the exact amount we received last year from our transportation fund, or from the state transportation, and the local assessment would be $792,540. And as we tell you every year, this is the part where in the regional agreement it should be funded at 100%, but in the state's budget, it's based on the availability of funds. So we do see your legislators or state reps, representatives, let them know that if it was funded at 100%, that local assessment piece would be 0 to all of our communities. So it's important to all of our communities. Again, last year was roughly 86%, so leaving a balance of $792,540. And then other expenditures, we have our MSBA project that was done roughly late 2011 and 12, and that amount is $305,875. The amount we assess to the communities is $192,000, and that's been the same since I've been at the school in 2009, And as far back as I can see, that's what we've always assessed the communities. And the difference comes from our excess and deficiency account, or as the town calls it, the rainy day fund, 113,875. So our FY27 budget being 43,677,993, and then outside of the budget, we have our bond payment, which is 493,250, which comes from local assessments of 493,250 to our communities. And then we also do our OPEB reserve account, and that's at $50,000 from our excess and deficiency account. So that gives us an increase from last year of 5.6%. I can take questions as we go along, or at the very end, whatever you're ready to do. Just start if you have any questions.
So as you alluded to earlier, the enrollment at Southeastern from Easton students is down 14.7% this year, from 96 students last year to 83 this year. And that is the primary driver of the local assessment, is the number of students enrolled in the school. Next slide, please. So as we look at our total enrollment, we see that we have 1,726 students. That includes both 1,636 high school students and 90 in-district post-secondary students in our Adult Technical Institute. You can see that Easton has 83 of those students. 77 of them are enrolled in the high school, and the remaining are post-secondary students. I do at this point, I know we're talking about the FY27 budget, but I do want to kind of give you a heads up about what we see as trends for enrollment for Easton for next year. I think it's important to help you start planning. Mm-hmm. So we did just have our first ever admissions lottery. As you may know, last year DESE passed new regulations requiring all vocational schools to admit students by lottery as opposed to competitive criteria. One of the concerns that we had was when we ran lottery simulations ahead of the regulation change, we saw that the number of students from Brockton who were being offered admission went down, and the number of students from the towns went up. That obviously caused some concerns for us given the very significant fiscal cliff that we see many of our communities in. And that's how it played out. Brockton's enrollment numbers are down and the town's enrollment numbers are up. Last year, the current freshman class for Easton at Southeastern was 11 students. Based on the lottery that was held on March the 13th, you have 18 freshmen that will be coming in the fall. You have 12 seniors who will be graduating for a net increase of at least 6 students. So just to put that on your radar. I also want to let you know that we are pursuing Chapter 74 approval of a robotics and automation program that would be housed in our new STEM edition that we completed last spring. And if we receive approval, we would expect to enroll 18 more students total. And if the numbers hold, generally about 60% of those students come from Brockton, and the remainder would be spread out through the town. So we will keep the town informed as those numbers are really solidified closer to the beginning of the year. Okay.
All right, so on our next slide, we see the per pupil cost. I know this comes up many times. Again, the cost to educate a student at Southeastern, whether they're from the town of Easton, city of Brockton, or any of our other towns, is the same amount. The difference comes by the amount that the state puts in their state share and how much is in the assessment piece. So you can see here that the cost for all the students is the same to educate them based on the community's wealth and income, property taxes, and those variations will depend on how much the state determines that it's their share and how much the fair share is from each community. So Easton's total assessment for FY27 is $1,693,588. That being down from FY26 at $140,787. The next slides we have here, again, they're more just really informational purposes, just where Easton, some information on Easton spending, Southeastern's spending. And what I want to let you know here is that Southeastern, we take our budget process very serious every year as we look at requests and where we're at. And we hold true to that our net school spending, the actual net school spending, which is the solid blue line, and then the dotted line, the actual required net school spending. As you can see, one overlaps the other. So we're at the minimum required net school spending for FY27 and for 28.
Again, and the rest of these slides are more just informational purpose slides that you can take a look at throughout your own time. But I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have, or
One question I had, so just trying to do quick math here. In the one slide where you showed the Easton assessment, I think it was 1,693,588. Can you tell us what the per student cost increase was from last fiscal year to this fiscal year?
I can, just give me a second to pull out a calculator, but yeah, give me 1 second.
And then if you have your crystal ball with you, what do you think the increase might be for next year? Obviously, not
The per
we know
pupil
the student
cost?
side, we know the-
Yeah,
per pupil
it's challenging for us to predict because we never know what the inflation rate's going to be. And we also are we have been recipients of Student Opportunity Act funding, which not all communities get, but because we serve a very large population of high-need students, we receive Student Opportunity Act funding. And FY27 is the last year that is fully funded. So, going further ahead than that, it's hard for us to predict what the per pupil cost would be. But over the years, it's gone from like 22 to 23 to, we're just under 24,000 this year, or just under 25,000 this year.
Correct.
Yeah, so, per pupil. And that's educational costs, transportation costs, capital costs, yeah.
That grant that you just mentioned, that the will sunset, what was that amount roughly? Like
So
this year,
it's not carved out for us in our budget, but it represents about I think we figured it was about 1.15% of the total increase from state aid was Student Opportunity Act.
Okay.
Jan, do you have any questions?
No, I don't, thank you.
Mr. Howell, do you have anybody from this?
I have
Finance
one,
committee?
and I'll open it to my crew. You mentioned a Chapter 70, can you remind me exactly what that?
Chapter 74 Robotics and Automation
Yes,
Program.
that's the one. Is that going to be finalized and approved or not before the start of next?
Yes, yes, so,
That net total positive of 18 would be not calculated yet, but
correct,
potentially calculated once that comes.
yes.
When is that Chapter 70 awarded?
We will know by June the 12th.
Very specific.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anything from the FinCom side?
And just to get, so in FY26, the per pupil cost was 19,108, and in FY27, 20,404.
2404?
Yes.
The education costs. Anything else? Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Appreciate it.
From there, I'll give you a couple of quick slides on general government. This is a practice that we switched into last year. We used to do 2 individual nights, and we'd have everyone cycle through. All the general government departments would present as well. But last year, with the override, and then now we're replicating it this year, is consolidating all of our general government departments into one presentation, and then giving individual presentations to our larger departments. So the departments that are seen here on screen are what many of you might think of as town hall services. These departments provide services related to financial and legal compliance, operations, community information, voting, vital records, planning and permitting, assessing and tax collection, administering payroll and health benefits, managing the town's IT infrastructure, and more. The budget of the general government departments combined is proposed to increase an incredibly modest $56,000, or about 1.75%. And not included in general government, but also housed at town hall is inspectional services, which is categorized under public safety. And even more modestly, their increase is only $865 from 26 to 27, which is just about 0.25%. Other changes I'd like to mention in FY27 for general government, I mentioned earlier that the Planning and Community Development Department is down 20% 20% of their staff. They were staffed at 5, now they're at 4 with the cut of a office assistant role. Additionally, we are using revolving funds to help alleviate budgetary pressures, although that is not our preferred approach. Our preliminary FY27 budget cut the Finance Committee's reserve fund down to $70,000, but that has since been restored to its customary $100,000. We've also shifted some non-recurring election expenses in the town clerk's budget to a special article that you will see on the warrant at annual town meeting, and these are for the state primary and general elections this fall. Also, for the first time in a number of years, our town council monthly rate has gone up, so you'll see an increase to our town council line item. I included this chart here, which has been included in past presentations to show just how little we spend on general government compared to our neighboring communities and peers. As you can see here, we are dead last in general government spending as it relates to comparable communities and our neighbors. It is understandable after seeing our current year budget cutting into vital services like education and public safety to question whether those cuts cannot first be borne by administrative roles like those at Town Hall, but they have been. All of our departments spend fewer dollars per resident than their peers, but none have a larger disparity than our general government departments, who are at about 52% below average of their peers and near the bottom of all towns in Massachusetts. I know there isn't much to report here, but I will stop for questions if you have any about any of the departments, and I'll go back to the list in case you have any questions about any of these departments.
Mr. Helen, does anybody from the Finance Committee have questions?
You're the man. Go for it.
I'm going to ask Laura a question. So the town council,
Mhm.
I'm assuming it's outside council. We don't have like a.
We don't have staff.
So we don't have staff. Do they? I just noticed in fiscal year 24, we budgeted 175. We ended up paying out 125. Is it like an hourly that they bill?
It's a flat monthly rate. Labor council is separate.
Okay.
Thank you, Roger. Any other questions from the Finance Committee? Any questions from the Select Board? Okay.
With that, I will turn it over to Kristen Kennedy, the Director of Health and Community Services, for her presentation.
Good evening, everyone. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Kristen Kennedy. I'm the Director of Health and Community Services for the Town of Easton.
Do another one.
Pick another button.
There you go.
So, for those of you that haven't met me before or aren't familiar with Health and Community Services, this is just a compilation of some other slides that I've used in the past to illustrate a change that was made in the community back in 2016 when Health and Community Services was formed. We combined a number of existing departments with the idea that we would be able to better serve the community and find efficiencies by working together. We embrace the World Health Organization's definition of health, which is not merely the absence of disease, but it's the presence of everything else. It's having physical well-being, mental well-being, social engagement, and we really felt that's what this community needed. And that by working together, we could provide wraparound services, having a team that worked together to make sure that the quality of life in Easton was the best that it could be. I'm going to back up a little bit. My slides aren't very exciting, but this is what Health and Community Services looked like in FY25, almost 10 years after it was formed. And in FY25, we were making great strides in our mission. We were adding, in addition to meeting our statutory requirements of overseeing all the septic installations in town, conducting food inspections, camp inspections, and doing disease prevention and follow-up activities. We were making a lot of efforts in these other areas that I mentioned that we consider to be essential to public health. We were addressing the needs of our most vulnerable residents. In the wake of the pandemic, we were able to support and grow our services. Our transportation program specifically was expanding its radius and offering rides not just to seniors, but we were able to transport families to medical appointments. We were able to assist with other transportation needs. We established a division led by a deputy director that staffed a team that was finding resources and administering programs that supported Easton's residents and veterans. We established another division that expanded community engagement and programming opportunities exponentially and out of the normal box. We weren't just doing T-ball anymore. We were doing fishing with the whole family. We were doing cooking classes and coding classes. Again, seeking to engage all of those in the community, as well as those that might be on the margins. At this point, we were at 12 full-time equivalents. We had all but 2 positions being supported in the general fund. Did you take out my next slide? Nope, okay. So that's how we started out, fast forwarded into FY26 with the budgetary cliff that had been long predicted right in front of us. As a result, to be able to do what we had been doing, we needed to make some changes. At this time, we shifted 50% of our full-time bus drivers' salary over to a non-renewable grant. We shifted 20% of our transportation coordinator over to another grant. We shifted a third of the hours of the administrative assistant that works in this building to revolving funds and grants. And we gave up funding of $20,000 for our part-time drivers and shifted that over to grants. This allowed for a balanced FY26 budget, but shifted additional positions in health and community services out of the general fund and over to grant and fee-based revenues, which can't be guaranteed year after year, and as we've all said, is not really a sustainable model that we all are in love with. That's how we began FY26. Just after the beginning of the year, our full-time driver left to take another position, and in keeping with the budget measures that we were operating under, we didn't fill that position. Mid-year, we eliminated the transportation coordinator position. Without a full-time driver, it was hard to justify having a person dedicated to preparing schedules. So these went away. And these went over to other funds. So here we are. As we look ahead at the FY27 budget, you'll see that now Health and Community Service has 8.5 positions funded. The transportation program is now completely unfunded, with the exception of the gas that goes into the buses. The sole administrative assistant here in Frothingham Hall, who is now responsible for doing the bus schedules in addition to supporting the day-to-day operations here and any support needed by the community engagement team, is also unfunded. We have the ability this year to shift this to program fees and grants, but it's not a guarantee that we can renew it or sustain it long term. We've shifted all of our drivers' hours over to grants and fees. And while funding these came out in FY25, that time they were supporting a full-time driver that was in the budget. Now there are only drivers and there's no town funding for them. As a result, we've had to reduce the number of rides that are available. In our FY25 budget book, we boasted that we had been increasing the number of rides year over year and had set a goal of 2,500 rides for FY24. We did 3,200 that year. In FY25, we did over 5,000 rides. With 3 months left in 26 and a lack of funds for the drivers, we've had to limit our capacity. And we're on track to do just about what we did in FY24. I expect FY27 will be an even further reduction. Just to note, people would say, why not just raise the fares? Because of the way that we receive the buses through BAT and the way that they get them through federal funding, we're not allowed to require a fare on the bus. We are allowed to ask for a suggested donation, and we do, and we have a lot of people who give what they can. We're on track right now to come in with less rides, less potential for revenue, with about 10% less of the revenues that we received last year. To put in perspective, the revenues we received last year at a high of $7,600 funded 5 weeks of driver payroll this year. So the program assistant, as I said, continues to be a position that is funded by the fees for all the programs that are supported. So the budget that you have before you now reflects these changes, contractual obligations, and a small increase to our nursing service line item of $5,000. Again, this is to meet a contractual obligation. We are statutorily required to fulfill certain reportable disease follow-ups, and
We have the ability, we use a contracted nurse, a resident in town, who works remote and conducts this for us. We are coming in just about on budget. In an ideal world, she'd work an hour a day. This past year, we had the first case of tuberculosis in town that we had in probably my tenure, and I've been here since '96. That required daily observed therapy. So every day, she met with this individual and observed them taking the required medications to make sure that our community stayed safe. Those are the changes that I present to you tonight, and they do impact our delivery. We're not able to do as much as we used to be able to do, but we're doing the best that we can. That shift over into the Executive Office of Aging and Independence of our drivers has impacted the number of fitness classes that we're able to offer here. Back in '26, we started out with 15 classes a week being offered in this room. We're down to 8 because that's all we can afford. Again, we charge fees for that, but they don't come close to covering what the instructors and what the actual costs are of providing those classes. The only other thing I'll mention, and it's not a cut, is training. This is the first year. For the past few years, our training budget has been pretty stagnant, but like everything else, expenses go up. This is the first year I was not able to send my 2 health inspectors to the annual 2.5-day conference that the state puts on. This means they missed educational opportunities, they missed keeping up on current events, and they missed opportunities for the continuing education credits that they do need to maintain their licenses. I'm sure the chiefs will talk to some of the other losses in our combined programs that we really were excited about and we're moving forward. But that is about all I have for you, unless you have questions for me.
So, Kristen, thank you very much. I wish there were more people in attendance here tonight, to be honest with you, because this is just the tip of the iceberg, right? And this is to see these stark cuts to programs that are so important to our community. And we saw this work as a very well-oiled machine under your leadership and other folks that you had under your within your group. It worked so well, especially coming out of the most trying times anyone's seen in our lifetimes, and hopefully never that trying again. But the community outreach and the ability to get to folks and to offer programs that got them out of their homes as soon as we could, along with everything else you've done with the medical community. So it's really, really disheartening to see where we are now, the stark contrast. And this happens throughout the budget. It's going to be a common theme here tonight. And that's why I wish more people were paying attention, because this isn't where we want to cut. These are people's lives that are being affected on a daily basis, and the quality of those lives, the quality of their life for them is being affected on a daily basis. So when we look at, the groups of seniors, and later we'll get to the school department, and we talk about children, the places we want to invest for our future is going to be a theme here tonight too, because we need people to be joining society that are productive members that are going to continue to help to pay for things like this, folks that we want to take care of later in life, just as we all want to take care of our elders and do well by them and respect them and make sure that their quality of life is what we hope that ours might be one day. So thank you. I think this is very important to lead off with this. Thank you, Jamie.
Well said. I have no questions, just kind of backing with what Jamie said. Like, I look at this here and I see no room at all there's no room to cut anything in the future. Like, you're tapped out. That's very, very alarming. So it's very disheartening to see how strained we are with resources on something so important.
Thank you, Jim. Mr. Helen, you want to pick up?
This is a little bit in the weeds, but I'm just looking at your line item for gas and oil. It's been fairly consistent over the past few years, obviously. The price of gas at the pump has risen astronomically over the past couple weeks. So it may be a little bit early to tell, but do you anticipate if the trend continues to go the way it's going, that, you know, I do want to say, like, to your credit, it looks like you come in below last year on your budget, and I think that the department deserves credit. Obviously, it's a much different situation, so can you just speak to kind of what the plan is, if there is a plan, and to, again, this is fairly recent, I get we don't have one yet, but.
Watching it, but proactively, 18 months ago, our department replaced 2 vehicles with hybrids. So our inspection vehicles that are out on the road every day doing septic inspections, doing restaurant inspections, are actually functioning at a very high efficiency right now because of their hybrid capacity. So we're hoping it's enough of a buffer. Again, as we keep going, it's all, the drivers cost money, keeping the drivers in the seats costs money, and if we can't keep the drivers in the seats, the gas will naturally not be used.
And I do want to kind of highlight, you know, like, getting a hybrid vehicle is a very good investment because, you know, when something like this happens, it insulates the department. So, you know, just like from a capital perspective,
They're gas hybrids, they're not plug-ins, but it helps.
it's better than just a straight petrol engine, for sure, and it's definitely more insulating. And, you know, I think this is something that, you know, it's a good investment, and I you know, sometimes, you know, people don't necessarily see the parts of the trees. They see, you know, investment in capital. But, like, this is something that's going to save money long term, and it's going to insulate, like, vital departments like this for the long term. I was not expecting to get on my high horse on that, but I you know, I appreciate the fact that the department's thinking about that.
Thank you.
Just a question, Christian, because you use the term transferred to grants or moved over. What's the likelihood of that actually supplementing? And for folks who may not be here or on watching on the television, when you transfer over to grants, those are not guaranteed and they're competitive. What portion of your budget is grants at this point in time?
So we've had to move a number of positions over to various, one piece of the transportation is a grant that sunsetted years ago that we have been slowly and deliberately using to fill gaps so that it would be there. One of the larger grants that the department does receive, and it receives it under the Executive Office of Aging and Independence, which basically used to be Elder Services now. And that's a formula grant that is evergreen right now. It is based on our senior population, and then the legislature will set a dollar amount per senior, and we receive that automatically. I believe it's kind of leveling out right now, but that is something too that luckily in the COVID years, they changed. It used to be you had to spend it or lose it. And now in COVID, they realized we couldn't spend it because we weren't doing anything, and we were able to create our own little reserve fund there. We've gone through about half of that reserve fund in addition to the grant as far as the drivers are concerned in the past 2 years. But that money is coming in, but we live within our means on it. When I reference the fact that we've had to cut fitness classes, that's why. It's a lump sum, and at the beginning of the year, we have to look at that sum. We have to address postage. And another way where we cut our dependence on that is we do produce a newsletter. It had historically gone out monthly in the mail. That's gone to quarterly. That's cut staff time needed to prepare it. It's also cut the postage and given us a couple more weeks of driver time. So it's living within our means on that one, but for the foreseeable future, I don't see that one going down. The Massachusetts Council on Aging has made a very strong advocacy for keeping it at least the dollar amount, the minimum wage amount per senior. So they made a really good argument that isn't every senior worth at least 1 hour at minimum wage. And they've been like, again, we pay them dues out of that grant to be able to act on our part. And then we're We're working with BAT actively right now. They're looking into some Mass Department of Transportation grants that may become available in the fall that would be competitive, that we would have to apply for. But, you know, like everything else, we do what we can to get what we can to keep ourselves rolling.
Thank you. Just want to congratulate you on the last, I don't know how long you've been here, but a lot of neighbors use our services. The one thing I want to point out is that these are also the most vulnerable people that live in Easton.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
thank you.
You're very welcome.
Christian, I just want to let you know that we very much appreciate all the efforts that you have put in over the years for these folks in town.
Well, I don't do it alone, and I don't do it just with my department. We touch every other department behind me, so, and we have the support of every other department behind us, so.
Thank you, Christian.
Yep.
Next up, we have the Ames Free Library with Director Ian Dunbar.
Good evening. For those who don't know me, I'm Ian Dunbar, the Executive Director of the Ames Free Library, Easton's public library. The FY27 budget request is going to be the MAR minimum required by the state, $615,685. It is calculated by an average of the 3 previous fiscal year's appropriations plus 2.5%. Like I said, it is the minimum required by the state to keep our certification. The certification grants us access to state aid funds and allows interlibrary loan amongst every other library within the state. We feel that this level will allow us to keep functioning the same as we have. We know there isn't the excess funds to request from the town at this point, and we are able to continue the services we provide with the minimum required to meet certification. The preliminary budget for the library is a $1,634,180. As you can see, about half of that, actually half of it first, comes from the endowment set up to create the library and maintain it in the first place, with about 40% coming from the town of Easton and 12% coming from operations and fundraisings and the state aid itself. Like most things, the bulk of our expenditures will go towards personnel. We are nicely staffed, about 15 full-time equivalents. That is split between two buildings, working nights and weekends as well. And they do amazing work, I would say, with community outreach, doing programming here, doing outreach to the schools, the rest of the town, doing nice vital work. Materials and programming is the primary you can think of as library services. It's the books, it's the children's events. We are required to spend a certain percentage of money on materials each year based on the town's population. So 13% of the appropriation has to go to its materials, so that's fairly consistent. So that line level remains level most years with it. Everything else, let's see, administration, we're able to bring down a tiny bit by moving things in-house. Some services, bookkeeping, for example, we've moved it to in-house, done by the administrative assistant. Save some costs and increase efficiency. It's very nice. The building and grounds does go up each and every year with 2 historic buildings and a campus that's heavily used. There's always projects. But yeah, overall, the budget is what it is, and it shouldn't be too bad. The statistics are from last fiscal year, since this one have an end, but we lent out 147,000 items. This includes books, movies, power washers, CDs, and some digital items. 13,000 programs. A good chunk of that is actually from our ESOL program, which is virtual. which is why the 17,000 people is attendance. Museum passes, that anyone can go out. 88,000 visitors, which doesn't include the garden, because we don't have sensors out there. And then what I always try to harp on, digital divide. 6,800 people coming to use the public computer just to access the internet, to apply for jobs, apply for housings, just check their email. And then almost 10,000 people using the wireless between both buildings and the grounds. Within the circulations would be, we circulate 10 hotspots, which allow people to have internet outside the library, and those are always used. We may have one in at a time, but they're always out. Database sessions is the one thing that is consistently growing between years, because since COVID, people are using the library in different ways. They're getting a lot of their materials digitally. Databases generally consists of educational resources, but now it does include if people streaming movies from the library, reading, getting books on their tablets and such. 6,400 reference questions that people help with, and 10,500 registered borrowers. The photo is just one of the children's events in the summer. I wish it was sunnier in there, but it is what it is. And for example, we have 130 regular story times for the year in fiscal year 2025, with over 4,000 kids and their families attending. And the summer reading program, almost 300 kids registered for it, and they read 176,000 minutes over the course. And then our 8 garden shows have almost 1,100 people in attendance, so they're very well attended. And this is the joy of paying for personnel. They devote time and energy to these things. As I said, our ESOL program, English for All, which was historically a volunteer program. We brought in the manager who was doing it as a part-time employee, and she then recruited 7 different volunteers. So she gives 23 different lessons a week to about, I think at this point it's like 38 different students split between them. But over the course of just counting each person there, it's almost 700 lessons for the year and over 2,000, people attending those lessons. And then the manager, Julie, has a big focus on getting people into the American culture, doing it more than just this is a lesson, helping them. They do movie nights and game nights and picnics, and they take field trips, really integrate them, and people then come to other library programs, other services around town. So it's a great asset. This is just a graph showing the income and expenditures library has based on what is appropriated by the town and what is financed by the endowments of the library compared to similar sized municipalities around the area. As you can see, we obviously have the small amount of appropriation compared to other ones, while operating at a similar level. The background thing is just saying what's expended, so most of it is obviously gone out to programming. And another way to do it, this is the same thing, but just as per capita. So Easton residents pay the least per capita for our services, while the library is expending like similar amounts right through it, based on the endowments they have.
Is that the blue? Is that the blue bar?
The blue bar is the town appropriation. So yeah, it's as far. The green is total operating income. So what we receive from other sources, including the endowments, and then the purple is what we expend. So we said there in the middle, we have the least per capita amongst our peers. This is just the 13th within the population size. But what we have is comparable, and what we spend is a little bit higher. So we get a lot of value for the minimum amount you give us. I think for this, yeah, never mind. But so, due to the unique nature of the library being a private enterprise, primarily funded by the endowments established by the Ames family, Easton residents will pay about $1.97 a month for every $4.69 spent on library services over the course of the year, which is something we're just very proud of. We, like everyone else saying, doing a lot with little, because we're fortunate to have it. Yeah. Questions? Comments?
Do you have anything, Jen?
Yeah, I did have one question. Have you seen in this fiscal climate with the state, have you seen other communities lose their certification?
Yes, there are far too many municipalities around the state that did not meet the criteria for certification. The Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners is working very hard to issue waivers to the vast majority of them, which allow so they don't lose they don't lose access to state aid and interlibrary loans, even if they don't. But they have to show that it's not disproportionate cut amongst other town departments, and they have to show how this is being rectified moving forward. So each year, if they're in this state, it gets harder and harder, and then they risk decertification. The biggest worry about that is, like I said, libraries will get cut off from every other institution. Libraries are not forced to stop serving residents of communities of libraries that have lost their certification. It's up to the individual libraries, but I think pretty much all of them have decided that if a library does not have certification, their residents just don't have any services amongst the state.
Thank you.
Ian, I just want to say that I've been here now 16 years. I'm still in awe of our library, and I love it. But I'm going to give you, because I know a lot of us, because it's in our backyard, you can just think that every community has an amazing library. Our library and our schools say a lot about our community, and I've had the honor to be hosting a family from Germany this week, last 2 weeks. Ms. Pruitt got to meet them, and second stop after Ms. Pruitt's office was the library. And I just wanted you to have the feedback of, he was my college friend, and now his two children, a 15-year-old and 11-year-old, that were like, wow. I mean, this looked more like something out of the Bavaria region of Germany where they're from, and suddenly they saw architecture that reminded them of home, and they got to be inside that building and take in all that it has to offer for a little time. So thank you, and I continue to be humbled by it, and as well, it's a real privilege to get to show people our library when they come in from out of town. So thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for saying so.
Helen?
Full disclosure, I'm on the library board, so my nerdery of how much I enjoy the library is already well established, and I'm there like 6 times a week at this point, just to hang out, because I wish I worked there. So things are too loud though. Let's hope it's not recorded. I was gonna ask for a call out that as of right now, I think you buried the lead a tiny bit, that this is a 1.24% increase over last year, which is $7,500, right? So
yep.
Again, I think this slide sums it up really well. This is a really big bang for a small buck. The other piece that I really appreciate is you showing some of those key services. Like the ESOL piece is obviously huge, right? We were talking just now about some of our most vulnerable residents, like people that are living here that are our community, that need something that potentially is not easily offered to them. The library has an option for it. Fantastic. And then I also think it's really telling that on your computer and your reference question line items, they're almost the exact same number, which just goes to show that every time someone's in there and they're trying to do something that they may not be as familiar with, they're leveraging some sort of technology, they're trying to drive towards some sort of really necessary in today's digital age outreach. The reference librarian's right there to help them with those pieces of stuff. And I'm willing to bet there's probably hundreds upon hundreds of questions that are not actually captured in that they are just doing as a one-off.
Chances are good, yes.
Echoing Jamie, the building's great. Let's go now. Let's just do this. But it is a fantastic program, and kudos to you and your team as to all all the work you do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the,
Is there anyone else
statements from the
want to
finance
tell the
committee?
No.
All right.
Thank you. Ian.
Thank you.
Once again,
Next up is Fire Chief Justin Alexander and Deputy Chief John Carroll.
Good evening. Thank you. So we're here tonight for our FY27 budget presentation. We'll take you through the slides and take some questions at the end. And if there's something really pertinent to a slide, of course, feel free to interject at any point. So we put this up every year. This is our basis of what we operate. You know, the bold, you know, is what we do in priority order. I say this every year. We protect people, property, and the environment in that order. And we do that day in and day out. And we always, you know, the fire department, we always find a way, and that's what we do, and that's what you call us for, and we take a lot of pride in that. And tonight we'll tell you how we've adapted in a new response model to still try to do that to the best of our ability, given the resources available. 132 years, I keep this slide up as well, it keeps going up. So it's a long time. It's a real proud thing to have for the town some fire departments came in a lot later, but we've been around a very long time, and look forward to seeing that number go up each year that I present to you. We had a pretty modest increase, 8.7% increase in run volume, which is a pretty solid number. A lot of departments are seeing 3-4%. We saw 8.7. We don't see that changing in future years. It'll be somewhere between probably 3 to 5, and maybe on the upper end 8. We do not see it going down. That's a product of our demographic, as far as aging population, and also the threshold at which people call 911 is a lot different now, especially post-COVID. So we see people using 911 when they may not have in the past, and I think that's a cultural change. I think it's a generational change, but we adapt to that, and we'll still continue to provide the services. When people call us, we'll come and help. So the salary budget, this is a little different this year because it really doesn't track against FY25 due to the fact that we had such a substantial change in how we staff our department now. So our actual overall bottom line budget is down just shy of 11%, 10.88. So over FY25, that reflects the privatization of the ambulance service and the reduction of our staff. We'll talk a little bit about the staffing in a couple slides here and how that looks for us. The salary budget it still is not, one of the things I want to talk about tonight, and we'll talk about this at the end of this presentation as well, is while we made this change and condensed our staff on the fire trucks and privatized the ambulance, well, we talked at the fall town meeting when I got up and spoke and presented that we had a lot of different leaks in the pipe that we had to fix to try to stem the tide and stabilize the fire department. Condensing our staff was just one piece of that puzzle. We still have problems that aren't being addressed just because we privatized. We still have long shifts. Firefighters are still working 72-hour shifts. 48-hour shifts are longer than they should work. They should work their 24-hour shift and occasionally work a bit longer. Sometimes they have to come in Friday morning and they don't go home until Monday morning. And that's not great. That's a long time to work. That's people driving heavy trucks and doing these split-second decisions they have to do, working 72 straight hours is still a problem. And that part of that pipe, that leak has not been fixed. And it isn't going to be fixed with this budget that's being presented to you tonight. Additionally, we have no ability in our budget to absorb long-term injury and illness. So when somebody goes out, which we have 3 people, it's actually 3 now, breaking news. So we're at 73 of our shifts have, 3 firefighters rather, are out on long-term injury or illness. And that equates to 50% of our shifts having absences, which means there's forced overtime on every one of these shifts because we don't have the depth. And I'll have a graphic for this in a second, but when I talk about dropping for previous presentations you may have seen from me, that means if we have 8 firefighters working and the minimum is 7 firefighters that we can drop to, we can have somebody off and not need to fill that spot until a second firefighter is off. So that's what I mean when I say we drop. So when we have somebody out long-term on a shift that's at 8, they're automatically starting the day at 7 because that firefighter's out long-term, which means anybody who's on vacation or another person's out sick or a personal day, we're holding people, forcing them to work, and that does not promote firefighters wanting to be here and retention was one of those big leaks in the pipe that we had. And we were holding on at the moment, but the busy overtime season is coming, starting May to November, December, and that's when we're going to see that leaky part of the pipe really rear its head again. And we're really trying to work towards avoiding that. We'll talk more about how we get to that as well. So just a layout of how we look and where we've gone over the years. So you'll see that our levels have dropped across the board, obviously without the staff that we reduced over because of privatization. We peaked in FY25. FY26, we reduced 2 as part of that first cut that kind of started the tidal wave of the problems we had. And then when we got to that, basically where we're at now, which you see in FY27 at the bottom, that's where we reached that threshold point of, well, we need to privatize because we've lost so many staff that we can't hire them because people don't want to come here fearing they won't have a job in 6 months. And that's why we ended up privatizing. When you combined the inability to fund the department at a level that will keep staff and retention there with the inability to entice people to come here, we were forced into this position. And fortunately, we've been at this since February with the privatization with Brewster Ambulance. It's been going well. And we'll talk about how it looks coming up. So our shifts, department-wise, this is what we look like. So we have 4 groups, 1 captain, 2 lieutenants, and the remainder of the firefighters on each group. And then we have a mechanic, a deputy chief, 2 captains on day, 1 in fire prevention and 1 in training and EMS, and a full-time admin and a part-time admin. And that's what the fire department is, and that's what makes up those FTEs you saw on the previous slide. This is what we used to look like. So when we were at 11, this is our peak. This was a peak slide. So you would see the Easton ambulances at the hospital with 2 each, and then you see how the trucks would have looked in that model. So you'll see, when we're at 11, it worked, but we were never at 11. That's the problem. We were at 11, but our minimum was 8, that drop. And most days, 80+% of the time, we were never at that 11. We may have had the firefighters, but it requires overtime to hold to that 11. It's always that balance between, can we be at 11, or are we forcing firefighters to work so much that they quit? And so the old model is great, and we were working towards building where we could get towards staying at 11 and growing. But then the change happened, and we ended up here. So there are 2 people on those ambulances. They're both ALS. ALS is advanced life support. So they're both ALS ambulances. They're housed in Easton. They're here. They don't leave the town. We have GPS tracking to our dispatch center, SEMREC, so we know where they are, so the residents don't have to worry that they've disappeared and gone somewhere else and they're not here to help Easton residents. That's not the case. We've got a couple months under our belts now. There's been no real big hiccups at all. It's worked. We're not thrilled at how we got to this, but we've made it work. And the firefighters, to their credit, have been great to deal with, and I want to give them a shout out that they've done an amazing job adapting to this big change. And we're making it work at protecting the residents of Easton, and also to Deputy Carroll for the work he's done, because this is a massive transition for a fire department. It's really unprecedented that this has happened, especially in this region, and we've accomplished it. I'm not happy that we had to do this, but I'm proud of the staff and be able to accomplish this and still protect the residents of Easton given the resources we have. So in the expense budget, it's reduction of 34% over FY25. That reflects a lot of the costs we took out related to running the ambulance. So licensing, fuel, medical supplies, ambulance billing, a whole bunch of things there. That doesn't fix the structural deficit within that budget. That budget has always been underfunded as long as I've been here now. And we've had to have multiple end-of-year transfers to deal with it. So that's not fixed. We'll still have it, but we did reduce the ambulance portions out that we knew for sure we could as part of helping balance the FY27 budget. So the override is coming at the end of the month. What does that look like for us? What does that do to the FY27 budget presentation I just gave you? So it provides additional response capabilities by hiring 4 firefighters. So if everybody's working that day, there are 4 more firefighters working, 1 per shift, because we have those 4 groups. So there's an extra firefighter working. What it does do additionally is it reduces the number of times we have to have firefighters working 72 hours, which is a really big priority for me. I view it as a big safety issue. We should not be having firefighters working 72 hours. It is not right. And the override is a big piece in helping that, because that'll add one more person to the depth that we can drop on our shifts. So if we're at 9 and we can go to 7, that gives us 2 people who can be off without forcing overtime, without having those long duration shifts, and gives us some adaptability to handle if we have a long-term injury or illness. We still have one more that could be off. So there's a lot of pieces there that's really important regarding how this works for us. Additionally, a benefit is morale and retention. I am fearful, I said this last year at town meeting, the annual town meeting, and then again at the fall town meeting. The biggest thing in the fire service right now is, and I think you see it across lots of professions, is time off. People want the time off. Like it's a generational thing, I think, now. And when people are having to come in, let's say your child's birthday is on a Saturday and you're working Friday, Sunday, and you are forced to hold Saturday and you have to work and you can't go because you're required to stay, that does not make somebody want to stay with Easton Fire. And that happens, and we don't like that, and we try to avoid it, but sometimes we can't. And retention is important because this market for firefighters is incredible right now. It's been incredible for years. Any firefighter in Easton can go to any number of departments right now and be hired on the spot because they're desperate. Paramedics are, we used to put out 800 paramedics a year as a state to train them. Now we're under 200, and we need more of them than ever. And that means that our firefighters are in demand, and they can leave, and we don't want them to. So this is all part of this big equation. It's part of that puzzle to stabilize the fire department and get us to a point where even if we're in this changed form with privatization, the override will get us to a point that we think we can plug all those leaks and keep the fire department together. So we are, hopeful that people can understand and be educated and make a choice regarding the override. I want to point out, though, that it's still not going to prevent 48-hour shifts. Those will still be happening. 48-hour shifts are going to happen. It would take many more people per shift, which we don't have the funds for, nor the wherewithal. It's too much of an ask in the override to try to get to that point. So we do know that there's still going to be firefighters working 48 hours regularly.
So with right now you're doing 72,
Mm-hmm.
the override, you'll go down to 48.
Yes, I'm not saying 72s will go completely away, but they'll be reduced. And that's the goal. In order to get them to go completely away, we would probably have to increase our staffing beyond the 4 we're asking for now. But it's a marked improvement over what we're doing now. And I think that goes a long way with the mindset of our firefighters, too, that the investment's made to try to help. We can't quite get exactly where we want to get to, but it will make a big difference and put a real shot in the arm for the firefighters, knowing that we're trying. Training is another big piece of this puzzle. Our training budget was decimated as part of the cuts we've already experienced. I think it's one of the things that we have to look at is did the slides not the picture slides not go in?
No.
Oh, did I go right by them? I did. I don't know how they went by. I apologize. So let me just point out, I did talk about these. I want to show you one real thing here. Let me back up one quick second. So when we run here, one of the problems we have is I may make this point. See how there's less trucks on the left? Now there's less trucks here. We're running with less trucks now. That doesn't mean we're unsafe, and I want to make that point before I got to this slide, so I apologize. When we're running with less trucks and a condensed staff, that means we get one shot at this. We have to get there and be ultra efficient, highly trained. There's an adage that if you have enough firefighters, you can stamp the fire out. We don't have that. We have to be able to be technical experts and put the fire out. And we need to be able to train them. And we don't have the funds to do it. So we've committed to a model of less trucks with a condensed staff, and we struggle to train them so they can be that ultra efficient and safe when we have to be there. Seconds matter. We have to make split-second decisions, and the only way you make those split-second decisions is to be highly trained and practiced. And we don't do that. We're not doing it right now. We're trying to do it, but we just don't have the funds to do it. I put up there that we can only do more with less if we remain highly trained experts at our craft. And we're as low as we go with our staffing. We can't go lower. So the only way we can be better is to train the minimum amount of staff that we have now to be the best. And we talk about this all the time with our staff. We need to be the best because we're running less in a different way. And to protect you all, we have to be the best. And that requires training, which is why it's a very important piece of this override. It will restore our training funds, and we can really put a dent in getting our firefighters where we want them to be. So very, very important piece to this whole equation. And with that, take any questions.
Thank you, Chiefs. Get to your departments for all you do. It's really incredible, and it's been a big year of change for us as a community. And I'm glad to hear that it's been going generally well with the transition to private ambulance. One quick question. I assume this is the case, but new hires, should the override pass, would be paramedics and firefighters?
Yes. So it's a great question, and I can provide some background on that. So the way we're running now with Brewster is we're still a licensed ambulance service. Our 2 trucks, those 2 big trucks you saw on the screen, are licensed with the state as non-transporting ambulances, staffed by 100% paramedics, and we intend to keep it that way. And when we move into our substation in May, June, so we'll move in there, which means we'll actually be more likely to be first at most calls than the private ambulance, because they're going to be coming out of the old Depot Street station, which is part of the design. We're spreading ourselves out so that we can put paramedics as quick as possible in all quadrants of town. So our paramedics will still remain paramedics. We'll hire paramedics. We'll maintain those trucks as non-transporting ALS ambulances so that when we get there, we can provide that care. And even when we had the ambulance, it's Easton Fire, they would respond back from the hospital, especially Good Samaritan. And we have the ability to provide high-level care until the ambulance gets there. And we'll continue to do that in the privatization model.
I just wanted to mention that when we were fortunate enough to bring you on when Kevin Partridge retired and you came on, it was amazing to watch you take the department and your focus on training. I think was second to none. I think you've been known for that throughout your career. That you've made sure these perishable skills that your firefighters are absolutely staying current and on top of them and practicing with enough regularity that you're comfortable that their lives are as well protected as possible going into some of the most difficult situations. And then for our community, how much they benefit when our firefighters as well trained as you've proven in your career to bring people up to speed. So it is really difficult to see the training cuts, because I know it cuts at you personally, because this is how you keep your people safe.
Sure.
I really hope the community comes out and we give you some of the tools back to be able to get these folks up to the level that you want them to be. People need to come out. They need to come out and vote. They need to show up on April 28th, and then they need to come out to town meeting. Thank you for the work that you guys have done, especially with the limited resources that you've had. And just as you said, you're going to be there. And part of this, that's really difficult too, is we're not just putting the lives of these first responders who are being overworked and left on shift too long, putting them in jeopardy, potential for injury. A lot of this stuff goes home with these folks. And so there is a total, mental, let's just say there's a health piece, this mental health piece that we're neglecting by not supporting these departments better than we are. And, this is too about community outreach. The fire department, the police department, a couple of years ago, were doing an amazing job of turning around the perception folks had of public service and certainly of our public safety. And you guys were out there in the community. You, Chief Alexander, did an amazing, one of the open houses when you were showing people the benefit of closing doors in bedrooms and going to bed at night.
Close before you doze.
You're right, and you created videos, and your goal was to be tip of the spear on getting this information out to people, not just stopping there, but if you had the funds, continue to show people, hey, this is how we keep people alive. This is how we buy a few extra seconds so that we can get there and extract you from your house and have you go to work the next day.
That's right.
So thank you for all of that. We were there when you had that demonstration, and those are invaluable, intangible things that you brought to this community that I hope one day we get back.
Thank you. And if I may, just onto your point, if you look at this right here, our firefighters need, the standard is 15 to 17 firefighters in 8 minutes for a fire. That's what we have to have at a scene, in 8 minutes. Well, that's not 15 or 17, and they know it. And that means our job is to try to find them, and we're relying on mutual aid. We're relying on Stoughton being available. They're busy. They're facing cuts. Mansfield's in the middle of a med flight right now as we speak. They're not available. So our model is built around our neighbors being available, and a lot of our other departments are like that as well. I'm not trying to say we're unique, but it's the fewer people we have, the more reliant we are, and we are more reliant than ever. And it's tough, and the firefighters know it, but they're going to answer the call.
And we've talked about the downfall of becoming the draw community, right? When you're constantly drawing, it's like an emotional bank account. If you just keep taking and taking and taking, then what happens? You're asking too much of your surrounding communities, and we need to be there for them just as they're there for us.
I think what's critical too to me is that your statement about the fact that it's four additional firefighters is a step in the right direction, but by no means does it solve the problems. And it's still critical that we continue to try to build back to the 50 members of your staff that you had before several years ago. And the fact that we've lost 25% of our firefighters over the last couple of years is something I don't know that most people in this town understand and hear, and I'm glad you're putting that out time and time again, every time you meet with us. So I appreciate that.
And I appreciate it as well. And I think people say, well, what's enough? Well, enough is when we can have our firefighters not having to work 48 straight hours. Regardless if we have the ambulance or not. Like, it doesn't matter. If we have the ambulance on the ambulance, when we have staffing at a point that we're not working 48 straight hours, we're approaching a level of safe stability. You know, we're not there yet. We won't be there for a while, but we're making, hopefully, some incremental progress, which is what we want. Thank you.
Alan, from the Finance Committee side, I have one question. Are there any other considerations or lack of any teeth in that lack of training funding? Any other issues that we come up against, if other than the obviously very real impacts of that split-second decision-making, et cetera, but are there any other like municipal or statewide issues we come into if that training budget is not replenished?
So I think you're asking, like, is there like a minimum number of hours we have to do per year or something like that? So I mean, there is the recertification time that we do for our paramedics. We provide the access to that; they have to do it. But I think where the question is, to be a firefighter, there's not like a 30 hours a year requirement. There's standards that we want to meet, and where that really matters is if something goes wrong, where we end up as a town on the hook because we're not training our firefighters. If something bad happened, you know, A, to take care of the firefighter and their family. If something bad happened, B, what happened to the resident, their family, and their property. You know, the town, we have the mission, the responsibility to provide this service. We're required by law to provide this service. And if we're not sufficiently trained, I don't think a court in the land would be sympathetic to us and say, oh, that's too bad, you didn't train your firefighters. We're going to still be held responsible regardless. And I think that that's where this really lands for us in the absence of a set number of hours. You know, ISO, which is how they rate insurance, has set hours. Right. There are requirements for us to be classified as a certain class fire department. There are set hours there. It's not the law that we have to do it though, but we work towards the best classification that we can. But I think besides that, it's we need to protect ourselves as a town, and we owe it to our firefighters to let them have that training to be safe. And it may not be a regulatory thing, but I think it's like a moral, ethical requirement too as well.
I was also thinking about it from the standpoint of the number of hours they have available for that additional training, right? If they're on for 72 hours, I don't know if there's opportunities for them to have any downtime where they're able to check off some of those mandatory hours throughout the year. But it's another consideration that if they're doing that out of their own personal time to stay up to date, that they're truly like required certifications. It's just one more drop in the bucket of what they're already putting in for the job.
It is, and I think like in the model we have right now, there's a lot of long shifts, and that doesn't leave a lot of bandwidth, like you made the point, for additional training off duty, even if you could pay them.
Right.
Hopefully, if the override was to pass, we'd be in a better position to provide good quality training and have the bandwidth to do it. It's kind of one of those, how that puzzle kind of goes together.
Exactly.
They're intertwined.
Thank you.
So, three-part question, I guess. Looks like grade 1, step 4, which I guess is probably the lowest grade of firefighter on the roster. Salary's gone from 79 to 88K or so. Assume that's collectively bargained, or going to be collectively bargained, and where we anticipate the contract landing, or it's already landed. Question is, if the override passes, how does that salary range stack up against the towns around us? Because you mentioned that our folks are in great demand, and so the second part of that question is, are you going to be able to fill the positions if they get filled, if they get approved?
Absolutely. So the changes you saw reflect just for that reason, because we were hemorrhaging firefighters because they could go somewhere else, have safer staffing and more pay. So it did get changed to try to compensate for that as part of the reduction in staff. We reduced staff and increased salaries some to try to stem the tide. One gave to get the other, if you will, and then try to be competitive so that if we do hire,
Still shockingly low for what they do.
I don't disagree. But if we do have to hire, it is our hope that we put forth a model that people say we want to come to Easton again. Because when you saw that highest FTE level in that chart, people were coming here. Out of the 8 people we hired, or roughly 8, 6 of them were transfers because they wanted to be here. And then within a year of them coming here, they all left because they saw what happened. And we don't want to be that. So I think when you combine the improved compensation package with a potentially more robust staffing and safety model, we could become a destination. So when we put out that now hiring sign, we could proudly have multiple applicants who want to be here, instead of praying that we get one. And we usually get 0, unfortunately. So we're hoping that changes.
Just out of curiosity, you mentioned ISO certification. When a community doesn't, or gets decertified or less certificated, that affects our property insurance.
Absolutely.
Because they do look at the ratings, they do look at those communities. So it is a direct effect on our property, our insurance. Should you lose certification, or is it a grade certification, or is it just?
It's numerical certifications, and you go through a whole basically it's accreditation. It's different than the police accreditation, but they rate your water supply in town, your dispatch services, your firefighting staffing level, the amount of trucks and tools and hose and training, your record keeping, fire prevention program. It all comes together for a classification. I do feel confident in saying that if an override was successful with the staffing model we would have and the ability we would have to train and track that training, we could probably reclassify the town to a better classification and actually see people's homeowners and commercial insurance go down. So that would be a benefit. A dollar number, what people would save, I could not tell you. But I do see it being an improvement over what we're doing right now. And it's possible we could go backwards. I think it's less likely we would go backwards, but I think we would stand a chance of going forward if we do have the additional staff and the funds to train them.
Thank you, Chief.
Oh, is there a question? Do you have a question?
I was just.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I was just going to note, just because it's on the ballot in a few weeks, that we've had a few meetings of FinCom over the years since, and not because of the failed override, but in the wake of the failed override. And Chief Alexander, you've been at a few of them talking about this problem that the department's facing, and ways that I think the department's trying to be nimble and trying to work through it. And I know a lot of the criticism that I heard, or that I think has been out there about the override is departments aren't being nimble enough, or that they're not being creative enough. And I think I can say this about every department, but fire is coming to mind because we just happen to see a lot of this year. That fire has done a significant amount to be nimble and to be creative. But I think you're in a position where a lot of departments in town are, where we're just running out of room. And I think people need to think about, what happens when we're running out of room. And I don't think anybody enjoys paying more taxes. I personally don't, but I also like fire trucks come to my house when it's on fire. So, you know, I think for people who are listening who are just kind of below the override, we need to understand that all departments, fire in particular, have done a lot to try and be nimble and be creative, but at this point, we need help.
It's not often I could bring an aviation analogy into this, because I'm a pilot, I love flying as much as the fire service. What we did was, you can laugh, right? It's fine. He's been flying with me, he knows, I scared him. So, we were on a runway, running on a runway, right? And we moved, what we did to be nimble is we moved over to a longer runway. We found one next to it that was longer. That gave us a little more room to try to figure out how to stop this thing. But we're still not stopped. The end of the runway is still coming, and we're hoping that with some of these things, potentially the override, being nimble, that we can get the brakes on enough that we can stop, stem the tide, and stabilize the department for the next, 5+ years. While we were nimble enough to find a little extra running room, it doesn't mean that we're fixed. And I don't want people to be lost on people. Like, we're better, but we're not fixed. We're not stable. We still have a little bit more work to do, and it's our hope to educate people to make a decision on the 28th.
People listening, I just don't know what else we can ask of you guys. Because I feel like you've done a lot, and at a certain point, like to your point, you just run out of room.
Thank you. Appreciate the question.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Next up is the police department with Chief Keith Boone and Deputy Chief Pettis.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you. Keith Boone, the police chief. We've met. You're the only newcomer here, so it's good seeing everybody again. There we go. Sorry about that. Yeah. So obviously, I'm here to present our fiscal year 27 budget. We heard the word accreditation. I just do want to mention, because I am proud, we just achieved our 6th accreditation award. So we've been an accredited agency for now. We began the process in early 2000. We became a certified agency in 2006, and every 3 years since then we've achieved a reassessment for accreditation. We were the 35th agency in the state to do it. 84 have now followed us, so it's a credit to the leadership that's come before me and the town that supported the police department. Going back about 26 years ago now. So we did present this at the select board Monday night, and I can't thank you personally or professionally anymore for all the support you give the police department. So I just wanted to put up just a quick snapshot of these aren't all of our calls, but just to give you a snapshot of some calls for service just from last year. So just under 17,000 calls, 3471 911 calls. Our firearms licensing typically can float around 350 to 400. It's going up every year. There is a big trend with people wanting to get their LTCs. That'll come into play in a slide down the road. We have a lot of crashes in town. We're very proactive with our directed patrols, but this is a transient community. We have 24 and 495. It's a cut through town. There's a lot of dangerous intersections that we know about, but there is a lot of vehicular traffic that comes through. We had 21 sexual assaults. We had 124 general assaults, property crimes, which can be larcenies, receiving stolen property, shoplifting, things of that nature. Mental health, 165 calls just last year. I'll get into that. I know we've talked a little bit about community outreach already. We had 30 missing person reports last year. So all of these calls factor into some major challenges we have with staffing. So for FY 27, we are allocated 37 full-time officers. When I began serving as chief 4 years ago, we were at 39. So the police department has been seeing cuts regularly for the last 3 years. Luckily, we haven't had to lay anybody off, but through retirements, through attrition, we just weren't able to backfill the positions due to the funding. So our command structure, you're sitting with 2/3 of it right now. We have myself, a deputy chief, and 1 lieutenant. You know, we talk about comparable communities and our neighboring agencies. Just to be at the average, we should have 46, just to be at the average. That's where we should be. We're at 37. We should have 3 lieutenants and a deputy chief. We have 1. So it makes the demands on myself and our deputy chief and our current lieutenant that much more difficult to navigate. So you saw a similar slide like this from Mr. Dugan earlier. We're at the bottom of spending in the police department with our comparables in our neighboring agencies. Only beat Ashland. So we talk about being nimble and trimming fat and things like that. There is no where to cut from in the police department. We already spend lower than our peers. So our overall budget is $5,480,614 for this upcoming fiscal. So that is about just under 1% increase from FY26, and that's driven by collectively bargained obligations, step increases, and a very modest $1,800 expense increase for a vehicle lease. So this is a level funded budget from FY26, and the only increases you'll see is due to those step increases. So we're not cutting this July, beginning FY27. We already did it. So we're feeling this now. This is how we're operating today. So, and I can talk about how we navigated those cuts. So I talked about the 39 officers we had a few years ago. As we saw that number scale back, we have lost those 2 positions in approximately $200,000 that came from overtime and some other line items to get to the number we needed to have a balanced FY26 budget. But that 37 number is important because we're really operating with 35 officers today. We have 2 officers that are out on long-term injury, and I don't anticipate them returning anytime soon. So we're operating with 35. Of that 35, we're going to be at 33 in probably 6 to 8 weeks approximately. We have 2 officers going out on parental leave. I expect them to be out for 12 weeks. So for the first quarter of this fiscal, we're going to be operating with 33 police officers, and that's including myself and the deputy chief. That is a number that we haven't seen since I began in 2002. So that's just put in perspective where we are. We're really operating as a 20th century police department in a 21st century world, unfortunately. And so how do we navigate those cuts? So one thing we did, we couldn't backfill our detective positions when we saw one leave through retirement. We have 3 full-time detectives right now when we should have 5 at a minimum. And out of those 3, one of them is the supervisor who has to oversee our court prosecutor function and all of our discovery. And we've talked before, you understand what that's like, especially now. We're in the age of body-worn cameras. The amount of data that we have to provide to the court is absorbent. So he's stretched so thin, I worry about him personally and professionally as a detective unit with the crimes they need to investigate and the follow-up that needs to be done. It leads to him staying on overtime or coming in early to prepare for court. So all of these things are just affecting other areas of the budget that we can't control. So we heard about community outreach. So this was something the town was amazing in. We were really we forged a path really in Easton between our prior town administrator, Health and Community Services, the fire department, the police department, and we created a position in town for a mental health clinician, which many of you all know and have met, Stephanie. She works out of this office primarily, out of this building. And so what we were doing a few years ago, we were doing a minimum of 3 days a week, sometimes 5 if we could allow for staffing. The officers work a 4 and 2 schedule, so if those outreach officers weren't available, we would at least do 3 days of proactive follow-up on vulnerable people that we regularly have been dealing with for many years. We've made tremendous strides in that realm, and I know Director Kennedy talked about that. But the only way to take care of our patrol staff and the response to calls that I showed on that slide before, 165 of those, keep in mind, were just for mental health. We've had to really go backwards. And so through some grants through Bristol County DA, which are unfortunately going to go away on June 30th, we're able to do 1 day a week at a minimum. And so we're really just primarily doing follow-up. So those people that we were engaging with a few years ago, making strides with, they're getting left behind, unfortunately. And so we're going back into the model that when we do deal with them, the only resources a police officer really has outside of court hours is to bring them to the hospital. And they just get cycled through the revolving door of the emergency room, and police and fire are back dealing with them hours later on some occasions, unfortunately. So that is, we're going backwards as a community just in this one area, which we had other chiefs calling me for our policy on this because they were trying to copy our model because it was so successful. And it was very rare to hire someone to do this. A lot of departments were sharing one, and they were paid for through a grant. So we were really, again, forged a path on doing something very proactive in this town, and it's been unfortunate to go backwards. So the last thing I did was reduce our overnight shift staffing, which will drop to 3 officers on the road. For a town 30 square miles and upwards of 26,000 people, it's just not appropriate. It's not safe for the officers. We've had some major critical incidents in the overnight hours. We've had some good success. We had celebrated some officers the other night. We had a very bad car crash where we were able to rescue someone from a burning car in the middle of the night. Again, those 3 officers, once we save these people, we still have an investigation. They can't leave. So we have Route 138 shut down in the middle of the night for 4 hours with no one available to respond to calls. So what happens when we get a call, depending on what part of town it is, we would call Norton, Mansfield, West Bridgewater, and ask for help for mutual aid. If one officer is free, he could be responding to a domestic violence call by himself, and it's totally inappropriate. So it leads to burnout. It leads to job dissatisfaction. We've been fortunate. We've always been the police department people want to come. So we've gotten a lot of transfers from other police departments. It's only a matter of time before we fall into that rut where people just don't want to either come here or they want to leave. We have a growing department, young police officers that are all having starting families. They love the town, but if there's any uncertainty with their positions, they're going to go look for another police department to go to. We have a great core of officers that work here, so they're beyond marketable. They could walk on to any police department tomorrow if they really wanted to. So I've talked about the cuts. Again, this is really a rinse and repeat budget of last year, unfortunately. So we're living with it. So it's not like I'm going to try to tell you what I think is going to happen. This is happening today. Barring the override, this is how we'll continue to operate today, tomorrow, until the foreseeable future. If the override is successful, we will restore all of those cuts that I talked about, and it will get us the ability to hire up to 42 full-time officers. It's 5 short of what we should be just to be at the average, but we're trying to be realistic, and we understand. I live here. I understand where people lie with raising taxes and things like that, so I totally understand it. We came up with this number because I think it's fair, it's reasonable. It'll allow us to appropriately staff and function as a police department, an accredited police department. We'll be able to absorb those officer injuries much better than we can now when those things do, and they will come up. That's just the nature of public safety. So we're hoping for successful override, but if it doesn't pass, this is what we're going to walk into on July 1st, a replica of last year. So I can take any questions you might have.
Jen,
I'll just start by saying that I don't want to live in a community where we're asking our public safety professionals to put so much of themselves on the line and not have the ability to recharge and just not be under constant stress the way that our fire department and police department are. It's just unacceptable. I'm really glad to see that the focus on bringing back community outreach is part of your plan. I think that we've talked about this before in the past, like it's hard to quantify, but that pays dividends in the fact that it's avoided issues that will happen because you've seen this in your career. But it's hard to put on paper because it didn't happen.
Exactly.
And,
a lot of the cuts we're seeing have these downstream effects that end up costing us more in the long run in terms of, not just dollars, but risk to our residents, risk to your staff. It's just, we deserve better, as, you deserve better, and the fire department, we all deserve better in this community. And it's just, we need to do better.
I wish the entire community could have been in the town offices Monday night when the citations were awarded to so many of your officers. And the point we made that night was a lot of these people's lives that were saved, this doesn't happen very often. The probability of surviving a heart attack, of surviving a choking incident, a child who was brought back to consciousness, and to have all these people, and some of them show up that night, the gentleman that was extracted from the car along with 2 citizens that were also awarded citations, this doesn't happen that frequently. The percentage, the chance you're going to make it is very low, and that night we got to celebrate about 5 lives that are now not only survived, but living normally and without impairment because of the response time and the quickness. So can't say enough. And for me, it's been, I'll circle back to the mental health because you, Keith, I got to say, you in your 2.5 decades of experience and commitment to this community, but the outreach and the respect that you have earned in this community and the rapport you've built and the fact that people are not afraid, and we kind of turned because we had that, there was a concern, people were worried about the police department showing up. It hadn't, you changed that. That narrative became, people looked forward to interacting with you. And then you've always been so responsible about the touch and the importance you gave to mental health and making sure that you had a clinician that was able to be with you guys more than 1 day a week that could help to de-escalate and make sure that a mental health crisis didn't turn into some elevation of force crisis. And you've done an amazing job. I want to give those tools back. The community wants to give those tools back to you. And I think with a little optimism, people will come out and vote and do that. Thank you both.
No, thank you. Thank you for the support as always. And regarding that, we have great partners with the school, with the fire department. Everyone in this room behind me, it's not just us. It truly is. We have a great core here. Everybody knows it. It's not like this in other towns. It really isn't. So I'm lucky. I'm lucky to work with all these people.
I do have to ask, are you giving DPW the credit for the missing person, the child that was returned? Or did you use it?
I'm going to let Dave talk.
All right. Steal his thunder.
Thank you, Jamie. Mr. Allen?
That's good.
Yeah, I mean, just like, to kind of echo what Jamie and Jennifer said, I mean, I think it benefits the community that we have police officers who are good at their jobs and are well staffed, who can go investigate the calls and respond to what you need to respond to, investigate, when something happens, and due process is followed, and we do everything by the book, and we put away people that put it away, and keep everything safe. And to me, like this is another thing where like it's a no-brainer. Like, let's get all of them, have the resources they need. So many departments do so many things. Like police is like a department that wears a lot of hats and provide a lot of resources. Last year I asked you to get fingerprinted because I had to do that for one of my licenses. And I remember, this firm was very accommodating. It was great. One thing they did say when I came in, they said, "Hey, we do not have the resources to do this." And this is such a low priority on police departments, but it's a thing that comes up, and it's shockingly hard to get fingerprinted around here because I was concerned that there wouldn't be people, and so I looked around, and there aren't a lot of places you can go, and so it's great that Easton can do something like that. Again, low on the priority list for things that police departments do.
But it is important, and I've always prioritized. Now there's a finance committee. That could be the only interaction you ever have with us. So I always try to take it, this might be the only chance you ever have to have an impact on somebody. And so we try to make those meaningful when we have them, even if it's something like I said, as simple as a fingerprint. that's very important to people when they're trying to get a job and they're rushing around. I've gone and helped people myself because the staff is out on the road and they can't leave the desk and go back there. So I've even done it myself to help somebody. Come on in, we'll get it done. That might be the only time they ever meet me or ever come in the police station. And so I think that goes a long way, where at least they had a positive interaction with us.
Well, and I think like community policing is important too. Like, you know, I think to Jamie's point, like having officers that you aren't scared of, you can go approach them, like, and having like equal respect for the community, like that's been a focal point in policing. I know for a long while. I know it's a focal point for you, Chief, and like that's important.
And we have a really good core. I mean, I don't have the percentages. I'd say over 75% of our department lives in town, and the ones that don't, most of them were raised here. They went through the school system. I'm a product of growing up here. They care about this town, and they want to raise their kids here. They want to send them to the school. My son's at Bland James now, so like we're all invested in many ways in this community, not just coming into work and going on calls. So there's a whole other dynamic to our core. It's a young police department, and we want to keep them. They're well trained, and we don't want them to leave. I don't want them to leave to go to another town, because they'll thrive with it wherever they go.
I did want to ask, like with reduced staffing and less detectives to investigate, are you seeing difficulty at all? And do you think if there is, it'll be improved in doing investigations? And I mean, you all have some great solves in the past year.
We have.
Is it something that you're keeping an eye on or have concerns about? Or?
So my problem is they're so. They care so much about their jobs. I have to kind of pull them back so they don't burn themselves out. So they're just so busy that I'm trying to find a way to balance it. But eventually, like the follow-ups on property crimes, the pawn shop looks, and things like that, I'd be lying if I said they just might not get to them anymore, because we have right now like 3 significant sexual assaults they're dealing with, and when they're dealing with juveniles, which one of them is. It's so complex with CAC interviews, and they're going to Fall River, and they're going out of jurisdiction and working with other police departments. That could take just 3 days to interview one victim, and everything else doesn't stop. So they're playing catch up a lot, but again, high caliber detectives. Like, I can't say enough about them, and the detective sergeant is wearing 3 different hats right now, and I just worry about them burning out themselves. We should have 5 in there. I would argue even 6, because we should have someone helping the schools with a lot of the juvenile issues that we have. Story for another day. Again, wants and needs, but we need 5 detectives in that office for sure.
Thanks for everything you guys do. Lots of alarming things we're hearing tonight from all of our town departments, but one of the ones that struck a chord with me was the concept of mutual aid. Question about that. As we've had cuts in the staff and the population has grown, are we giving, or are we receiving more mutual aid than we're giving at this point in time? And is that something that other towns might put us in jeopardy, because other towns might say, oh, another call from Easton?
It comes in pockets. We could help Norton 5 times tomorrow and not help them again for 2 months. It really does come in pockets. I have such a good relationship with those chiefs, and we're part of the SEMREC, so we're not wearing out our welcome. I can tell you that if that's answering the question. It's really dependent. We're a unique town. We border Plymouth County, Norfolk County, and Stoughton, and then Bristol County we're in. So Stoughton's not always coming to help us unless it's something near Roach Brothers or something like that. West Bridgewater's really not coming over here unless it's something down towards that part of town. So
I think mutual aid in policing is a lot different than fire. It's not something that it's built on. It's like if you have some serious immediate crime, like a domestic violence incident, they just come in save, like life-saving, right? And they can't really take any action. I mean, they can from a technical standpoint, but they're not going to be able to write a report. So they're really just like stopping the immediate emergency and waiting for us to get there. They can't take the report or any of that. It's just
when they do that, do you have, unfair question, but do you have any statistics on the response time if you have to rely on that mutual aid versus?
Good. Yeah.
we're waiting for them, you know. I mean, West Bridgewater helps us they were with a K-9 if we had someone missing. That's the beauty of the scanners, right? We all listen to each other. If we know someone's hurting and needs help, we're helping and they're helping. But again, if sometimes West Bridgewater is only running 2 offices on the road, totally different communities, so they could be down at the East Bridgewater line and they know we need help. We're stacking our calls so they get there. Could be 15 minutes to check an alarm. Absolutely.
And it's not infrequent for, call West Bridgewater, see if they can take this call on the line, and nope, they're already tied up.
Yeah.
And then you're waiting for somebody to come from, deep in Raynham or wherever it may be.
Yeah.
Just very briefly, this is probably a little too hard to please, but I am curious. We're I think you mentioned this in the last answer. We're a border town, so
yeah.
we have Stoughton to the north, which is in Norfolk. We've got Brockton and the Bridgewaters, to the east.
Yes.
East sounds right.
Yeah.
Which is Plymouth.
Yeah.
So obviously, if we have an investigation close to the county line, that's potentially sending Discovery. Like talking about the court officer needs to jurisdictions, not just Taunton District Court and Bristol Superior Court, but potentially to Brockton District Court and Stoughton District Court.
And that will happen regularly. We have mutual aid agreements through the LECs we have, so we can help and they can help and things like that. But yeah, it can turn into absolutely that, going over to different courts.
So I just want to underscore, obviously you have some comparative towns up on that you showed on the slide. A lot of those aren't border towns, and it's just an interesting complexion. Is it something that you're finding a lot of resources are being spent on, just kind of an independent hurdle that some towns may not necessarily have?
Some of our border towns.
So when you put up Mansfield, it's surrounded by entirely Bristol County, and obviously, complex investigations may result in, things happen.
Yeah.
But they don't have the geographic reality of counties to north and east that are different than ours and create. Again, this is probably way too far into the I'm just curious.
No, I mean, I know what you're talking about. I think just from your field of work, if it gets too into that jurisdictional thing, we'll always defer to the DA's office, and they'll direct on who the correct agency would be to do something. If that's, I don't know if I'm answering the question correctly, if that's what you're asking.
It's not, but I think it's not an important question. I think people probably want to get home, so we'll talk about it offline.
Okay, absolutely.
No other questions?
So I have one more question, actually. So that's 16,000 calls. Not all calls are created equal, of course, but how has that been trending over the past couple of years? Just ballpark percentages, year over year.
So it goes in pockets. I mean, we were seeing for the last 2 to 3 years, about 18. We were 10 years ago, 14 years ago, when I made sergeant. I started doing the stats for the prior chief. We were around 13,000 to 14,000 calls per year, and that you could watch that curve go. We were hovering right around 18,000, just under 17,000. Some of that can be nuanced. We could be at 19,000 next year. Yeah. I mean, if I looked at the average, we're averaging between 17,000 and 18,000 calls a year, and that's gone up considerably in the last 10 years. So,
when you chart that against the staffing number, that burden per person is just enormous increase.
And again, it's hard to quantify because it's just not the number of calls, the complexity of the calls now.
Yeah.
Depending on what it is, if there's a child involved, if social services are involved, if there's a mental health component, if it's a sexual assault, it's not like the old days, so to speak, when you could go and clear a call in 5 minutes and be back on the road ready to respond. Some people could be at Target dealing with a call for an hour and a half, and so that's just tying up a car. The complexity in policing has evolved so much. Just in the paperwork processing and things like that, the demands the court has and things like that, it's extraordinary what's gone on in the last 10 years.
Just a point of curiosity too, you'd mentioned the LTC number going up dramatically and how that has an effect. I assume beyond the administrative, there's an aspect of understanding there's more guns in the community and more people who have access to guns, and that must be.
I mean it's that, and we have to process them, and so we have one lieutenant now who's I'm trying to have her oversee patrol operations. We're all talking about suitability issues with licenses, and I'm spending my day now talking to her.
about how are we processing this, where are we in the queue, there's legal constraints on how much time we have to process an application under the law. And, so we have a civilian helping us with it and doing our DMH hits. So we have, everyone in that police department is wearing different hats. Our public records clerk is helping us do firearms licensing. She's also doing detail billing. She's also helping payroll. We had one of our payroll specialists go out on a health issue for a few months early this calendar year. You're looking at the payroll department of the Easton Police Department for about 2 months, right? And we're not taking days off. We're in there. We're not turning it off. And it's not to say boo-hoo. It's just, it is what it is. We get it. We care about the department. Care about the town. We're going to get it done. But it's a unique situation we follow ourselves in. When you run at the bare minimum at all times, one person getting hurt or going out is catastrophic. And that's where we are right now. That 37 numbers, it's a very bad number because we're not even at it. We're really at 35. And you know, someone has an injury, you know, we're just backfilling. And then we're getting into what we talked about with the fire department. We're ordering people to work who don't want to be there. As much as I like to think we have a great positive work environment, people get burnt out, especially these people with young families. They want to get home to their kids. They don't want to miss these milestones in their lives. So when they find out at 11 o'clock at night someone got hurt and they have to stay till 8 o'clock in the morning, you know, at least a little job dissatisfaction. Things happen, and we get that. That's just part of shift work and in the nature of policing. But when you are consistently getting, working 16 hours, I know they're doing 72. We don't let people work unless it's a significant, extraordinary weather event or something, but we don't want people driving after 17 or 18 hours. I mean, I forget the stat. I think if you're awake for 24 hours, you're legally like a 0.05, so your motor functions aren't good. We don't want people driving around when they're at that state, so.
I think just for the LTCs too, to touch on that, a lot of departments, especially like our size, that's like half a job, right? If somebody does that two out of the 4 days of their rotation, and where we already have all our comparable towns, all towns our size have 3 lieutenants, maybe a couple have 2, some have 4, but we have 1, and she's taken on license to carry, which is like a half a job, and we're already, we only have a third of the.
In a perfect world, we'd have a dedicated officer doing that, and we'd have a scheduled time. Now we're like, oh, we'll try to make it so you can come in. Can you come in between 3 and 5 next week? Okay, Wednesday we can do 2 to 4, and we're just constantly trying to piecemeal together to serve the community. That's what we're here to do, and we'll make it work. But it's we've been saying this for several years. You all understand it, so, and you all support us. So I can't thank you enough. But again, I hope people are listening, out in the public. I hope they're, and it seems like they are. I hear it. I hear good feedback. We get, I have positive conversations with people. So we're hopeful that April 28th is, and then town meeting go well. And
Chief, just because you made a comment earlier about the night shift, did you say 3 officers?
Yeah.
What's that night shift? What is it from?
Midnight to 8.
Yeah, so
And 3.
we could drop to only 3 available cruisers on the road, one inside the station and 3 available for calls. And if there's a significant call, 2 of them are tied up, and then that leaves 1. And then
Nothing good happens after midnight.
my dad always used to tell me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to thank you for your service to our community and how much you guys do for Easton and the safety and the service you guys provide.
No, thank you. I mean, the credit goes to all the officers. I'd love to sit here and say I'm doing it all. The days of me responding to calls, unless I'm on my way to a meeting or to town hall and I hear something, I'll respond. But it's really our line staff that are doing all the good work. They really are. We try to put them in positions to be successful, and it's tough right now. But I try to do everything with their best interest because they're the ones doing all the work. They're the ones taking care of everyone here.
Yeah, I actually had the opportunity to go into the station. I was actually getting a license to carry a renewal.
Oh,
and,
so you're the one that's taking up all this time.
Well, I was there and I was reading one of the signs you have in the station about that application, and an officer came running up from the back room or from the room behind the screen, literally ran up to the window to the glass and asked when, what support I needed. I told him that I was just reading the sign, I'll be on my way. And he literally ran back. And
Yeah.
it was very obvious to me that he was covering multiple jobs. And it's just, in my professional life, you can't function that way and do things right first time, goes down, efficiencies go down, stress goes up.
Right.
So my question is, why didn't you ask for more?
We tried.
Can we change it?
We tried, that was last year.
Yeah.
So the lieutenants, you're only, can you go back to the slides that show the positions?
So we have one lieutenant now. Do you want to see what we would do? So what I would do is we would promote. And part of this, I would make at least a second lieutenant. That's part of what we would do, because in a perfect world we would have 3, but if we can get to that, I'll talk to the new town administrator and see if there's a way that the money works out, and it all depends on how this shakes out. But really you need to have an operations lieutenant and an administrative lieutenant to properly run a police department. We're wearing all these hats ourselves, and a lot of times we're doing sergeant level work and lieutenant level work because there just isn't people there to do it. He's redacting body camera footage for public records because I tell him to, because we don't have anyone to do it. Or I'll be processing the discovery when the detective goes out on paternity and things like that. So having this ability would give us that extra boost we would need. So, the good problem to have would be the recruitment process and getting 5 new officers, and I'm confident that we would be successful in that. But I think psychologically, knowing help is on the way goes a far way in public safety. When they know, okay, now we're going to be able to hire. That takes the stress from the orders off. They know the help is on the way, and we've been through it. I've worked here for 25 years. We've seen these peaks and valleys before. I've never seen it like this, but we've seen staffing shortages and things come up, and it was just a different police department 20 years ago, really was, than it is today, and the needs of individuals changed.
It's still behind the average. It would just get us to where, we're not sustainable right now. We can't have our detective sergeant running court and running detectives and taking cases himself, and our one lieutenant doing LTCs. It's not sustainable, but getting us 5 would be, it'd be on the lower end of the average, but it would be a significant help.
Yeah, when I took over as chief in 2022, we had 39 officers for about 6 months. That was the highest we ever got, and it's been, since that time, we've lost staff through retirements, and we just couldn't fill them. But that 33 number is, honestly, I'm thinking, 4 or 5 months down the road. That 33 number really scares me, to be honest with you. Having 33 officers available for patrol for the department for that first quarter of the fiscal year, it's going to put an enormous strain on the officers that are already overworked.
Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, next up is the unforgettable Dave Field, except by me apparently, for Department of Public Works. Good job, guys.
Come on up. Good evening. Dave Field, Director of Public Works. With me is Greg Swan, Deputy Director, and Jeff Clunan, our Water Operations Manager. So I know a lot of you have seen these slides before. I'm going to go through them very quickly. I suggest you don't blink, you might miss some. If anyone has any questions, please stop me, but I'm just going to rifle through these and then we'll get to our proposed budget. DPW is currently comprised of 38 FTEs. We're down 2 from last year. We cut 2 positions, and we'll be cutting another one next year. What we do, obviously police and fire, everyone knows what they do. DPW, it's a little more obscure for a lot of people, so that's why I think it's helpful. We handle road maintenance of 117 miles of public roads. We deliver water. 645 million gallons of water was delivered last year to 7,800 services. Water performed 93,000 meter reads. So water main breaks is one of the ways we look at the health of our system. And you can see our water main breaks are, although they're lower than they have been over the last few years, we still are trending upward on the scale. We have a water main breaks dashboard where we track our breaks and we track problematic mains that have multiple breaks on those that same year of construction. And we're trying to target those, but we need millions to really make millions and millions, tens of millions, to really make a significant improvement. We're working on that now systematically.
What's
Sure.
the blue versus the red? What's the blue versus on the map to the far left?
Oh, on the far left, so blue lines are our water lines, and all the breaks are, the lines with frequent breaks are shown in yellow with the breaks in there. So we just go on, it's got several different metrics, but basically a length of construction of main, it's the amount of breaks per foot of it. And then we also have on the bottom right of that chart, we have breaks per year of manufacture of the pipe. So we can tell which ones are more problematic, and we aim to get those out first. We handle snow and ice. You may have seen us plowing a little bit this year. We handle building maintenance, both school and town buildings. We maintain 838,000 square feet of building space. We'll be adding to that next year when our new facilities open up. We completed over 1,800 building-related work orders in calendar year 25. We handle grounds maintenance, 176 acres of general mowing, 42 acres of sports fields, cemeteries. We kind of do it all. We handle trees, removed 293 trees, and trimmed another 127 last year. We maintain 136 town vehicles. We handle the GIS system for the entire town, including the assessors department. Typically have about 32,000 user sessions per year. Maintain 183 different web services for various departments. We handle the sewer collection systems. There's 3 systems in town. Last year, we collected almost 29 million gallons of sewage. And maintain our pump stations, treatment plants, siphons, and various other things like permits, inspections, and cleaning and CCTVing of those lines. We handle the stormwater. We have a lot of stormwater infrastructure. We'll get to this in a little bit when we talk about the stormwater utility. We did handle solid waste. We handle it now, but we're going to be eliminating that program in 2027. As Mr. Dugan mentioned earlier, basically the rising cost of providing the service and reduced staff made it just a critical pinch point for us. We would have had to have been charging $135 per quarter. And now that we've ended our program, Waste Management is going to provide that privately for $87. So I think we made the right call here. It just wasn't sustainable as a town program any longer. We maintain the streetlights. We own 1,400 streetlights. We save over $157,000 a year, both in the rental savings and the energy savings. And that number is a little dated. It's probably 5 years old, so it's probably higher than that now, since energy costs have increased since then. Last year, we maintained 72 streetlights. We handle engineering and project maintenance, project management. We have 3 PEs on staff. We perform site plan review. We issue permits. We do in-house inspection, in-house design, permitting, survey, and layout. Currently managing $193 million in current and future capital projects. This is one example of some of the projects. This is Day Street and Park Street drainage improvements. These are roads that were coming up for paving. We know they had some issues with the drainage. We did full survey of all the drainage out there, CCTV to see what the condition was, found a lot of substandard corrugated metal pipe, came up with design plans to take those out, did that in-house and constructed it in-house at a significant savings. This is the Public Works and Public Facilities. This is a rendering of the DPW site, but that's a project we're working on a daily basis right now, will be until it's done. There's a progress shot on the left of the steel going up at the DPW site, and out front, which you can see from Depot Street, the Police and Fire Building. Then we handle the miscellaneous stuff. We operate our landfill. We have a active gas collection and flare system there. We have to do quarterly air, groundwater, and surface water monitoring for that in perpetuity. We administer grant programs like our Green Communities annual Green Communities grants. We've gotten almost $1 million in Green Communities grants. We're applying for more. We handle bridge and culvert inspections, traffic safety evaluations. We get frequent requests for stop signs, speed limits, speed bumps, all those things. We evaluate those issues and design and recommend improvements when necessary. And then we worry about our health and safety for our employees and our facilities. And then we have things like Arbor Day, Hazardous Waste Day, graduation setups, voting setups. We hang banners. We hang tricentennial banners. I did about 300 of them last year, and we have to take those down. So it's something, any service we do, any job that is not in another department's title, like if it's not policing or putting out a fire, it usually falls under DPW. And then probably our most important job is as an emergency response. We are emergency responders through FEMA, and something we take very seriously. We work well with our partners at Police and Fire. This is just some examples of some of the things like sinkhole on Bay Road and tornadoes from a few years ago. So with that, we'll get into the FY27 budget. The overall DPW budget is going to be just under $12 million in FY27. The main change is the cut to solid waste. And you see kind of the pie chart on where we stand percentage-wise, what the budgets are made up of. Overall, the general fund budget is only 32% of our overall budget, and enterprise makes up 68%. In that general fund, 63% is payroll. We have more expenses than a lot of the other departments just because we have utilities for a lot of different buildings that aren't just DPW. We repair our vehicles. We have building maintenance funds, highway materials, things like that really add up, including vehicle gas and oil, which I'm projecting is going to go up significantly. On the DPW administration side, very minor change, 1% increase due to contractual payroll. In buildings and grounds, we're going to be eliminating another position. We previously eliminated one last year, and so there's an overall decrease of about 5% in the B&G budget. On the highway side, it's level funded. We eliminated one last year, a position last year. There's some contractual increases due to renegotiation of a contract. Snow and ice, no change to the bottom line. Just a snapshot of where we stand on snow and ice this year. The 14-year average since I've been here is on the left, and what we had this year projected-wise, we're just over $1 million. We had a significant amount of snow this year, 71 inches. And our costs are relatively low compared to our cost per inch are still very competitive. I just want to take a second to acknowledge and kind of brag about the performance of the DPW during the blizzard. I think did a great job. We logged a lot of hours, 2,400 staff hours, 7,500 vehicle miles logged during plowing. One missing child found and returned. Easton staff performed exceptionally, and that really goes to management and knowing the techniques and everything else. We performed better than a lot of our surrounding communities. We had very little snowpack on our roads compared to other communities around us, and that's all management. And Jay Concession, highway supervisor, deserves a lot of that credit, but all the staff, we're well-trained. Everyone's been to the classes. They understand salt usage and being efficient with it. And our salt usage was efficient. We used probably less salt in this storm than we have in other major storms, but we use it at the right time, and that's all training and management. And that's why we were able to save a lot of money in the storm. This is actually a very cheap storm for us compared to others in the past. So just as an example of how well we did, if you want to try to be brave and look at your Facebook posts and comments, you can usually people don't hold back. We usually put out updates of our storms and get maybe 5,000, 10,000 views, and we get a handful of comments, and usually you're like, where's the plow? I haven't seen it. We put up 5 Facebook updates, got 223,000 views, 300 comments, and 2,000 interactions. Almost all of them are positive. So that's saying a lot in this day and age. So, on the water enterprise side, we have a significant increase primarily for debt service. We are adding 1 additional treatment plant operator to bring it up to 4. That's a 365-day-a-year job. We originally had 1, we've added 2, a 3rd, and now we're going to add a 4th. So it's going to round it out so it'll be appropriate, and that can be shared. Those responsibilities can be shared. We were having way too much on 1 or 2 individuals to manage that. Vacations and everything else, holidays, is really hard. So having 4 operators in that role will be great. The debt service, again, is the big driver here. So there's a 25% increase on the water enterprise fund, but we are raising the rates to recoup that cost. So it'll be a net neutral. Solid waste and recycling, again, eliminating that. There's $100,000 in the next year's budget to help close out that project, that program. We have to pick up, dispose of extra barrels, things like that. So that'll end the project and close out that enterprise fund. Sewer enterprise, just a small increase for debt service. So basically the budget considerations are the same that they've been every year I've given this presentation. We continue to work with fewer bodies than are recommended. We need more money to maintain our assets, our buildings, our roads, our fleet. Deferring maintenance of equipment and assets doesn't save you money, it costs you money. So at some point, we're going to have to pay the piper on that. Inflation and current material costs have really impacted our ability to provide services. This is true for our fuel budget. It's level funded right now. Same thing this year. I'm projecting about a $30,000 deficit in our fuel accounts. And next year, just if the prices stay where they are right now, next year we'd be looking at probably a $60,000 deficit. That's something that we're not recouping through salary increases, through budget line increases. We're level fund basically all of our expenses, so that's going to have to come out of something. Some of the DPW staffing metrics, we should have 17 full-time equivalents in building maintenance. We have 5. We used to have 6. Now we've eliminated positions. We're down to 5. Vehicle maintenance, based on the composition of our fleet, we should have 6.5 full-time equivalent mechanics. We have 2. Highway was the second lowest staffed in the operational audit prior to the cuts. So we're probably on the lower side now, and DPW administration was the lowest staffed. Some of the things we're looking at that may help here is our stormwater utility. A stormwater utility provides a dedicated, predictable revenue stream by assessing user fees based on impervious area. We have a tremendous amount of existing infrastructure, which is well past its useful life. And we currently have identified $35 million in needs, and we have nowhere to pay for that. So the select board appointed a stormwater utility steering committee in the fall. The committee met many times, I think 7 times, had a public meeting. Ultimately, the committee is recommending a stormwater utility be created at town meeting, and we create a fee structure where all single-family residential properties and residential condos are assigned a flat $25 quarterly fee, or $100 annually. And then all other parcels are going to be assessed a $25 quarterly fee based on ERU. So that's the equivalent residential unit of 3,900 square feet. So in the example I show up here, a non-residential parcel that has 9,000 square feet of impervious area would be assessed 2 ERUs or $50 per quarter. So this would be basically everyone paying their share, with homeowners a level playing field, because most of the homes are very similar in size. Whether you have a large home or a small home, relatively, the impact is similar. What we're looking at is a stormwater fee that really encompasses those larger commercial industrial properties that have a lot of stormwater generation, that they pay their fair share. We anticipate this would bring in $1.3 million in annual revenue, which will be used for stormwater purposes. There is a draft application that you can scan that QR code and see what the impact is for all the properties out there. You can look up your own property or any other property you're concerned about, see what that impact is. I'll leave it up there for a second because I see people reaching for the phones. Yep. And I can go back to that if we need to. So potential uses. So using that $25 quarterly fee, $100 annual fee, we could pay debt service to maintain a street sweeper, catch basin cleaner, and dump truck. So those usually have a 12 to 15-year lifespan. 105 annually would kind of pay for those things over those 12 to 15-year lifespan. You pay for some of the operating costs of that equipment. It would pay for some personnel. So we're not anticipating hiring personnel. We're talking about shifting from the operating budget to the stormwater enterprise, a heavy equipment operator, a special equipment operator, and possibly a civil engineer. It would allow us to comply with our stormwater permit compliances, which we have to do now. And it would leave about $820,000 annually for projects, for drainage, culverts, basically maintenance and replacement projects. And when we have a bigger project, it could pay the debt service for a larger $5 million project. We have many of those that have been identified as needs. So the next steps for the stormwater utility stormwater utility is a town meeting vote in May, and if approved, the select board would adopt some regulations in the pricing structure, hopefully in June, and the billing would begin next fiscal year. And then the last thing is the DPW override budget. This is a $700,000 menu option, or option number 2, menu item number 2, primarily for roads and sidewalks. We currently have no local funding for roads and sidewalks. We have needs of well over $2 million a year. We rely solely on our Chapter 90 funding right now, which is typically $730,000 a year. This year it might go up to $1.1 million, but again, it's still way short of where we need to be. And this would also include the restoration of 2 positions. So 2 of those 3 positions have been cut. This would restore 2 of those. Our staffing, obviously not as compelling as our police and fire counterparts as far as the emergency nature of things, but our staffing is so low now that we have trouble fielding crews to do the things we need to do. We have so many jobs, and I kind of went through it all those things we do on a daily basis. To grab 3 people and put on a tree crew, it's tough because we're mowing fields, we're doing other projects. To get a crew to lay pipe on our Day Street or Park Street doing a project, those are not individual tasks. You need 3, 4 people. We could not really cobble those people together very much because we have so many other competing needs. So having our staff restored would go a long way to DPW operations. So that's all I really have. I'm happy to take any questions. Again, I'm sorry I didn't let these guys talk yet, but I'm sure they'll jump in as needed. So
first, thank you. The scale and scope of what DPW does is incredible. And like you said, a lot of times it goes kind of underappreciated and kind of hidden to folks because when things are going smoothly, you're not getting called as much. But the second things go any other way that someone's used to, I'm sure you get tons of calls and the pressure picks up, and the amount of emergency situations you have too that you're responding to a lot of things, right? At the beginning of the presentation, you said 38 people. That's your staff.
yes.
All those things.
Mhm.
Do you know what number you should be at for comparable communities? I can't recall what it was in DPW. I tried to do the math on your slides, you have 5 in the
It's-
and things go well, but what's the...
It's very hard. Every DPW, there's 351 cities and towns, and there's 351 ways a DPW is done. Some DPWs don't have buildings, some don't have water, some don't have sewer, some don't have, so it's really hard to compare apples to apples. The operational audit, I compared our highway department, because most towns have a highway division or department in some form, and we were the second lowest staffed at that time. But again, that was before we did our cuts. Our administration was the lowest staffed of our comparable communities. But it is really hard to look at an overall DPW because we do so much in our buildings. It's really hard to look at. But I would say to be comfortable, I would rather that number in the mid-40s. But again, we understand But we understand, 40 was a number we hit. It was the highest number we've been since I've been here. That was previously higher in the 70s and 80s when the town had a trash program where we had our own trash workers. But since that, we've built up from like the 34 range to our 40. Now we're down to 38, going to 37. We have several unfilled positions that we just can't fill, so we're effectively at 35 right now. But hopefully, once this budget's passed, we can go ahead and hire those positions back. We just don't want to hire someone if we had to cut them. So, but yeah, it's a hard number to give you. I don't really have a magic number to say we should be at this, just because the variability between DPWs across towns. Yeah. Yeah, so that's where we can use the metrics on like the facility side, like we should have 17, we have 5. The mechanics, we should have 6.5, we have 2. That'd be in an ideal world. We know we're not in an ideal world, we're just looking to try to get some of that back. And the 2 on the override would go a long way.
A quick question, last year when we were building both the override and budget and the budget, how does this ask compared to that last year? Is this scaled down? Because I think a lot of people hear everything you just talked about, and especially where we stand behind the 8 ball on road repair and just trying to keep up with all of it. It's a small number, I think, for most. I mean, to me, it's small number because we know how much there is in infrastructure that needs to be repaired and brought up.
Yeah, so the number last year just had restoration of the cuts. It didn't have any additional for DPW, just on restoration, correct, Wendy? Yeah. Yeah, sorry. And again, the road one wasn't included in the previous override. That's the road condition funding is really more of a quality of life issue. I think for most residents, having safe and reliable roads, especially in the neighborhood roads, which we're really limited on getting into neighborhood roads, and that's where most of our needs are right now. We just have no way to get there. And so this would go a long way to help that quality of life that I think most people would see.
Not just quality of life, it's also the response times.
Safety, yeah.
Safety,
yeah.
And then it's the vehicle maintenance of all these vehicles that run over those roads and are large hard equipment. Less maintenance time goes into vehicles that are traveling on better roads.
Yep.
Thank you.
Al? Income's favorite subject, which is still the next budget, still. What's the philosophy behind, obviously this is an outlier year, but is there any process to revisit that and look at that from an increase standpoint, or is it, we're level funding because of what the expected is or what the average is, I'm assuming, but?
Yeah, so we're level funding because of state law. So you, correct me, Wendy, if I'm wrong, but if we raise our budget a certain amount and then we want to go down, then we can no longer overspend, right?
You can overspend.
Yeah.
Raise the deficit on subsequent year's tax rate.
Got it.
If you cut the budget, you have to appropriate at least the same amount as the prior year.
Got it.
So the previous, when I got here, the snow and ice budget was $188,000, and we routinely went way over that. Even on a light year, like last year, we had 31 inches of snow, we still spent the $500,000. So having it at a responsible level, which I think we're close to, is probably where you want to stay, because if we risk going up, if you go up too high, then you can never go back. And then now we can't fund something else in the town that needs to be funded.
Thank you. Anything else on this side? Shout it out.
Yeah, I was just going to say, just something that you touched on. I think everybody in town, if you have a genie and 3 wishes, there's a lot of things I think we probably would ask for. I mean, health and community services is running a public transit agency at a property and all that's impressive. But I think, one of the messages I think that we had from last year is I think people are concerned about their personal budgets. And I think that's a big issue of why the override ultimately failed. And I do appreciate something that you said, and I think it's a consistent tenor from DPW to the public safety departments coming here, where your asks are very narrowly tailored to get yourself on solid ground and move forward. And I do think that departments that are here asking for an override like deserve credit for that, because I think I appreciate the fact you're being conscious of that. I do have a question. Solid waste, we're cutting it. We have a landfill. Obviously, we can't, bulldoze a landfill. What's our long-term plan for that?
So the landfill was closed. It was opened in 1970, and it was closed in the 90s. So that is something that there's a closure plan. The landfill generates methane gas just because of what's in it. So we have to have a flare system. We have to maintain that flare system until it no longer generates methane gas, which will be longer than any of us in this room will be alive. And we're required to do, air and groundwater testing in perpetuity. There is no plan. We have a solar field on top of it, which we get PPA money for, and we schedule out and get savings on our electric bills. But there's really nothing we can do with that landfill other than another use that would work. Other towns have put golf courses, things like that. We've decided to go solar, so we're getting the solar benefit, which is more than the cost of running the landfill, which is probably a good thing. But we will have to run that landfill and do all those air and monitoring tests until it no longer generates anything as not a hazard to anyone.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Just on a personal level, thank you for keeping the street clear during the snowstorms. I know I appreciate that. I think Patrick also appreciates that.
Any other questions? Comments? Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.
East is Easton Public Schools.
Evening, everyone. I am Dr. Risha Cabral, Superintendent of Schools, and I'm joined this evening.
Skills Guidance Director of Finance.
And we are presenting jointly our FY27 budget proposal. We're starting with a brief orientation of the school system. We are, as most people know, a high-performing district with strong outcomes. We have 4 schools. We have over 3,300 students. Our students are in age from 3 to 22. We also have a daycare on campus. We have 538 staff members currently. While we have officially 80 clubs and 51 sports teams, something that I'll repeat a bit later in the presentation is that we have many more activities for our students that come from our staff members volunteering their time. Most people may or may not be aware that when we have social events for students at night, when we have dances, when we have events, when we have awards ceremonies, our staff is volunteering their time to be there. And that's also true of many clubs and activities that aren't currently paid. We also outrank many of our neighbor districts, including those that the Department of Education compares us to. We are top 20% statewide and maintain our position as number 1 in Bristol County. When we start our budget conversation, we always do it with these target priorities. We are conscious of how we evaluate the needs of the district. We have operated in the 13 years that I've been in the district in the reactive or essential phase, except for 2, last year and 1 year prior. This is thoughtfully aligned to our district strategic goals, which is the center of when we start our planning every year. This timeline, as we had announced back in November, was going to be slightly accelerated because of the efforts of the town, but it still follows the same process. And everything we do comes from our strategic plan, which was put together by a large group of varied stakeholders from across the town that really set the tone for what we do and what we hope to achieve in the school department. This was followed by staff input
reflecting on the strategic goals and what we need to do to close achievement gaps. It went to principal presentations and executive review, back to the staff members, and then finally our public participation, presentations, excuse me. And now I will turn over an evaluation of our cost drivers and our continuing cost drivers and pressures to Director Spagna.
So I think before we get into the budget, it's important to go through a few of the things that have influenced the budget this year. We have a few pressures and constraints that we're dealing with. Obviously, our contractual obligations, step and lane movements, and negotiated agreements are driving over 80% of this budget with our staffing. There's a state minimum aid reduction potential. This fiscal year, our state minimum aid is based on $150 per pupil. The governor's proposed budget, which is very early in the process, is showing $75 per pupil. That could go up to $150 by the time they settle on a budget, or it could also go down to $35 per pupil. We don't know where that's going to be. We have some grant funding uncertainty. As you know, federal grants from year to year change and fluctuate annually, and we'll go into that a little deeper as we go through the rest of the presentation. And obviously the shifting student needs. One of our main priorities is we have to make sure we're covering the needs of our students. But there are some positives here, some stabilizing factors that we're working with. In this budget in FY26, we've aligned our transportation costs to our contracts more closely. We've reduced some contracted service reliance that we have, projecting temporary needs are projected to be a little bit lower in that area. We've eliminated some one-time costs, for example, retirement incentives and some of the unemployment that was elevated in anticipation of unemployment costs for this year due to the layoffs. And then just the recreated personnel supplement helped us to align our budget more closely to our actual staffing needs.
We'll get into the figures that correlate to the stabilizing factors, but just one quick note about the minimum aid reduction. Statutorily, that is set at $30 per student, so it could actually go down to $30. One thing that is important to note is that if the amount goes down or if it goes up, once the budget is set for the school department does not receive those funds. It would be fortunate if it goes up, and that would go to the town, but it doesn't change the school department budget going forward.
So as you know, the school is a recipient of entitlement grants. We talked about how it fluctates from year to year. You can see the variability between FY24 and FY26 and what our awards have been. Basically, a lot of our programs and students' population are supported by some of the program needs that these grants allow us to put into place. We treat these funds as supplemental rather than relying on these to support our core operations. But however, there are some services in there that we do rely upon. So if we are to lose any of the funding from these grants and these other entitlements, we'd need to find that source of funding somewhere. Some of the concerns, for example, and this has just happened recently, a couple weeks ago, we heard from the state that the federal Title I grant is in jeopardy of being eliminated for us. On the good news, if the data is correct, they looked a couple years back, the poverty level in Easton dropped below 3%, and in dropping below 3%, that's the potential where we could lose all funding for our Title I grants. That's being challenged right now to make sure that the data is correct, but that's just one of those fluctuations that we just don't know whether it's going to be there or not.
Could you just repeat that? So you're saying that?
Yes, that's a very important point.
I didn't understand. You're saying that because
our income level in the town has gone down?
Based on, I think it went back to 2024.
So the grants are based on the census, and there is there are several funding levels, and 3 of the funding mechanisms for Title I, you need to be over a certain percentage. We are currently challenging that metric that has been used because we have gone from over 5% poverty according to the census to under 3%. And if we look at our neighboring districts, we are, according to this data, for example, we have a poverty rate according to the census, that is higher than Sharon, for example. Lower than Sharon. So we are challenging this right now. It is something that they are, we're not very encouraged usually that these metrics change, but we feel as though we can't leave any stone unturned, and so we are working on that. But it is concerning to us, and it's not just the Title I grant, but you can see it's a very large grant. It fluctuates every year, and we have found out in the past in August what our Title I grant is going to be for the year, and you can see that it makes a very big difference in what we can offer. So we want to make sure that that stays stable. Unfortunately, not only that, but with the current administration, our federal grants have been more mercurial than ever before and very difficult to follow. Some grants that had been awarded, fortunately, we did not fall into this category, but we do have colleagues that received grant funding that projects were well underway when those grants were halted. So things that are sort of unprecedented for us in an already difficult to predict environment have kind of changed the landscape for us in terms of being able to predict, even on longitudinal data, what we can expect in a particular school year right up until the school year starts, or sometimes even midway through the school year. But that Title I grant is something that we're working on challenging. We will certainly keep everyone updated on that, but the process is one that doesn't really encourage many positive outcomes. But again, we feel it's important to pursue that.
Is it an administrative process, like through the Department of Education?
It is, yes, but it stems from a federal grant originally. But again, it involves the census, which is 2 years behind. It's something that we've actually been struggling with Title I for quite some time because we have no way of predicting what that's going to be. And obviously the census, there's quite a bit of time in between every census. And so our hope was that there was some kind of metric that they use that we could replicate to sort of predict what that's going to be, because the numbers don't change annually. So we should be able to project it into the future, but it's something that has not really been able to be explained to us either by the Department of Education or even the commissioner. We've asked for some clarification on that. It's interesting is, yes, an understatement.
So can I just have a clarification, please?
Mm-hmm.
So you're saying that the poverty rate, which was almost 6%.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
The poverty rate, which was
Yes.
almost 6%, is now about 3%?
It's, I believe, 2.8%. 2.97. Which, when we look at things like our free and reduced meals in our district, which is based on federal poverty levels, we run around 16% a year in the school department. So we have trouble reconciling the numbers that are used for different purposes by the state and also by the country when it comes to federal and state grants. It's not unique to Easton, it's affecting a lot of districts right now.
Okay. So there is a capital request again this year. We met with the board last week and put a request in for $250,000 in capital needs to help support and replace and maintain our technology fleet. I think it's important to maintain that fleet so we can avoid any unexpected spikes in cost due to repairs or maintenance that might arise, and to make sure that the kids have the access to the supports and the technology that they need to continue with. Unless you have something to add.
This is a modest request. It has been just technology for approximately 3 years now, because we did work very collaboratively with the town to receive the ability to move ahead on a very important security project for our buildings, which is well underway right now. This has put off a lot of preventative maintenance for those 3 years. And so we are having needs that are arising that are reactive. As Director Field said earlier, it can be more expensive, obviously, if you are doing maintenance in a reactive posture as opposed to a proactive posture. And so we're trying to catch up on some of those facilities needs now. But we're very grateful that we can continue this technology request, and exceedingly grateful for being able to upgrade our security on our facilities, because that's going to bring us really at state of the art for the entire campus, and that is priceless.
So just before we get into the details of each line of the budget, just to give a quick overview of where we're at. The FY27 budget is $50,096,817. It represents a $1.4 million decrease, or a decrease of 2.8% from fiscal 26. It reflects all the adjustments that we made. If you see, you can see that salaries are level funded, and we will go into the detail of this in future slides. Fringe benefits have been reduced by $680,000 due to some one-time expenses that have been removed. Same thing with contracted services. That's down about $596,000. Supplies and materials is a decrease of $180,891, and a modest increase in other expenses, which I'll explain momentarily. Importantly, that this reduction does not reduce our workforce at all. It still maintains our core educational services. It's just a realignment of the budget. So when we take a look at salaries, like I said, it's level funded. It represents the largest portion of the district's budget, totaling approximately the $40.5 million. It reflects the updated personnel supplement and alignment of staff to current position needs that we actually have in place. The level funding does absorb all contractual step and lane movement under the existing contracts and agreements, as well as a modest increase is reserved in preparation for our ongoing negotiations that's happening now. These adjustments have effectively absorbed the salary increases that occurred during FY26, allowing the overall salary budget in 27 to stay level. So the increase that we had that represented in 26, that met the need that we have coming into 27. The proposal maintains current staffing levels, does not include additional workforce reduction, is based on current projection. It's important to note that how we end our negotiations that are happening right now, if that exceeds the amount that we've built into this budget, well, then we're going to have to look at where that funding will come from, and that could lead to other potential cuts or trying to reallocate costs from other sources. You can also, we can go to the next one, I'm sorry.
The next one after this?
We go backwards?
No.
Okay. Sorry.
That's okay.
So fringe benefits. Basically, the reduction here is mainly the removal of the one-time costs that were placed in FY26. The elevated unemployment costs have been normalized. We brought that down. We're not anticipating layoffs this year. We're not anticipating a lot of unemployment happening going forward. The retirement incentives that were offered in the previous years are not going to be offered in FY27, so that's another large piece that was dropped down. And basically, again, it's just a realignment of those fringe benefits to the appropriate costs that allow. And there's some movement between cost centers too. Some of the budgeted funds from the previous year have been moved to line up to the DESI code function where it should be. So you're going to see that throughout the budget. You'll see movements from one line to another, but it's realigning where it belongs.
DESI being the Department of Secondary and Elementary Education, they have made modifications to their chart of accounts that we're still fine-tuning. And for example, the fringe or cell phone, while it's a small, relatively small number, there is no $10,000 increase in that line. It's just moving it from one line to another, and so it shows an increase in that particular line. It shows a decrease in another line in the budget. And then unemployment, retirements, those are things that are very difficult to predict, but you do have to make sure you cover it in your budget. Our staff is so well trained, and they are extremely have great reputation for working in Easton, and obviously this is a high-performing school district because of their efforts, And so fortunately, the staff members that we did need to reduce last year were able to find other positions really quickly, and so we're able to realize this unemployment savings.
So similar to fringe and salaries, under contracted services, we were able to align costs more closely to actual operations for FY '27. Transportation costs, like I said before, were aligned to contract performance and our anticipated need. Contracting nursing was reduced based on projected need. We also are planning to prepay $500,000 in out-of-district tuitions this year, and we'll be applying over $1.3 million in special education offsets to manage placement costs. As we go a little bit deeper into that, if we can go, unless you have something to add.
Well, I know I keep talking about the mercurial aspects of these figures in the budget, but this is a reflection of that as well. Transportation we're projecting it to go lower. We have both special education and non-special education legal requirements for non-special education. There's the McKinney-Vento Act, which requires the town to pay for transportation for any students that have home instability and fall into DCF custody, become homeless, and we have to transport them to districts where they may have temporary housing for the duration of the temporary housing. That is not something that is easy to predict, and it happens throughout the course of school years. We had a steady increase for multiple years, and so we had increased the budget last year to meet that need because it is a legal mandate, and this year that number went down. Same thing with contracted nursing. That does not mean the nurses in our school department. That is for nurses that we contract for an out-of-district placement, for example. If a student is medically fragile and needs a nurse with them at the out-of-district placement, the district is responsible for paying for that. If a student is in our district in one of our specialized programs and they need nursing assistance, a one-to-one throughout the day, the district pays for that. Again, that is difficult to predict if a student moves into the district or out of the district, and so it can have an impact of 6 figures in any one year. Of course. That really isn't something we can predict, and what some districts do is they will maintain a figure like this to have a quote-unquote buffer in case something happens. We are not in a posture where we have buffers in the budget. We run lean, and so we are going by our actuals of the year before. If we do have, as you noted, if we do have an increase in students that need out-of-district transportation, or we do have an influx of students that are displaced, we are legally responsible for paying for that. And so we would need to reduce in other areas in order to make that happen. Does that answer your question? Okay.
So if we take a look a little bit closer at out-of-district placements, we talked about how we're offsetting those with some special education revolving fund and the use of circuit breaker. They rely heavily on, this adjustment's relying heavily on those funds, but they're limited in duration. We have to remember that these revolving funds, even circuit breaker, they're not designed to last a long time and offset operating costs. It's similar to free cash for the town. We could use these funds for one-time needs, and we felt that this year, for the FY '27, to get the budget realigned, we would rely a little bit on that special ed revolving fund to help offset some of these tuitions and costs. You can see here that our actual out-of-district placement cost is $3.1 million, just over $3.1 million. We're going to be prepaying $500,000 towards some of the tuitions, our collaborative tuitions for next year, which brings the expense for next year down. And the $1.3 million is offset with, like I said, the special ed revolving fund and circuit breaker. So, and what I'd like to do on the next slide is give you an idea of what the effect on that special ed revolving fund would be if we didn't just do it as a one-time, but we relied on it in our operating costs. Using some conservative estimates for revenue inflation and expense inflation, if we were to continue to use this revolving fund, and it shows you the current balance as of FY27, if you look at the third line from the right, that's our FY27 balance, and we're going to use about $262,000 in cost in 27 for that. If we were to maintain that cost, the expense obviously would far outweigh the amount of revenue that we're bringing in. We wouldn't even get through fiscal 28 with support. So those costs would have to shift to either another funding source or back into the operating account. So it's important that I say this because I just need to understand that this isn't something we can do continuously every year. We can be very strategic in how we use it. It can help offset some of the costs, but we won't be able to maintain this cost year over year over year over year. It just doesn't replenish.
It's also important to note that several years ago, the state recognized the need for districts to have something to help address the unanticipated expenses of special education for students, especially with the highly escalating costs of day placements and residential placements for students. Day placements can average around $50,000 for each student each year, not including transportation costs. Residential has now topped, in the first time in my career, I've seen residential placements over $300,000 per year per child in that setting. There is an account at the town level that we were able to put money into, I believe twice in past years before we came into a situation where we weren't able to add to that, specifically for things like unanticipated tuitions. There's approximately $250,000 in that right now. Again, one child, that's 1 year of tuition potentially in an out-of-district placement that could happen unexpectedly. We've been trying to get to a point where we can, at the end of a school year, for example, add to that in the event that we have that situation. But even that obviously is not sustainable. But I just want to be clear that there is another area for something of that nature. But while it is a significant amount of money in the realm of special education, it is not a long-term fix, and it could be something that could be used literally in one school year, unexpectedly.
For supplies and materials, the majority of the reduction that we have in supplies and materials is due to the decrease in textbook purchasing for FY27. Most of the textbook purchasing, based on conversation and work with the principals, we're in a good place right now. We don't need to make that additional purchase, so we're going to take that out of the budget for next year. It's basically an alignment adjustment, like the non-instructional supply lines. It's not limiting the students' access to any of the instructional supplies. It's not limiting their access to textbooks. It's just a realignment and to bring it down to normalized for what we need for FY27. Other expenses represents a very small portion. It's kind of a catch-all of the miscellaneous items that don't fit into any one of the main categories. Category reflects a modest increase in professional development. Again, this is one of those areas where it was primarily just a move from one previously budgeted DESI line that really didn't belong into the correct line. So that's what is driving that professional development increase, that small amount. There's a small adjustment in our routine miscellaneous expenses. You know, there's inflationary costs that's built into that. That represents that small amount. But again, this is a very minor piece of the budget.
And when we say we're fine-tuning DESI lines, not to get too far into the weeds, we certainly can answer any questions on it, but there are some judgment calls with this as well. Different districts will align things into different lines. If we're getting books, for example, some districts will put that under textbooks, some people will put it under instructional supplies, some people will put it under the library account. So DESI does provide guidance on what should be in each line, but it can be interpreted differently by different districts. We're trying to align it so that it's the same in every school across the district, and everybody understands how to use the appropriate lines for their purchasing.
So I'd like to go into just a little bit of what the budget does and what it does not do. It does achieve the budget realignment that we're striving for. We want to get our costs down to normalized costs so that moving forward, we can move forward confidently. It manages our projected costs. Like I said, we're prepaying our out-of-district tuitions, and we're strategically using our revolving fund. We need to start to, rely on some of those funds whenever we can, whenever possible, to try to minimize the impact to the town and the community. Like I said, we're using those grants and revolving funds. But we are maintaining our core educational services. We're not looking at further cuts to staffing. We're not looking at reducing services to the kids or any of the core educational value. What it doesn't do, it doesn't increase any net cost add to the budget for any new initiatives that are being put in place. They are being fully offset with the new programs that we're putting in. It does not restore the previously deferred programs. It's prioritizing our fiscal needs more so than new programming right now. It does not reduce the workforce, as I said, and it does not fully reserve the long-term funding challenges. The town still has its structural revenue issues. It's a step in the right direction, but we are aware that there's a ways to go, and we have to be a partner in that.
Just a footnote to Director Spagna's reference to offset programs and the cost neutrality of increasing any programming in the district. We have only in the last, since in my knowledge of the district in the last 13 years, probably in the last decade, we've added, for example, special education programs to the district so that first and foremost, we can educate our students here in their home district with their peers in their neighborhoods, in these beautiful buildings that the community supports for them. But it also creates a fiscal savings. When we talk about the cost of students being outplaced and the fact that it is so unpredictable, it does create a lot of instability in the budget, a good amount of the budget. So we are actually looking at creating another special education program. They have to be timed to coincide with the needs of the students, obviously, and we do have a cohort that is appropriate for a program that we're working on. We would not begin that program unless we were confident it was cost neutral, and we are at a point where we believe it will be cost neutral for next year and potentially be revenue generating in the future. If we have a cohort of students that is lower in any year, for example, we can tuition in students from other districts. We have students that travel all over the state for specialized programs. We are talking about it's called a multidisciplinary program for medically fragile children, and there are not that many of them available in the state and not with open enrollment. And so we could potentially have, for example, a child in Norton or two children in Mansfield who qualify, and instead of them paying for transportation to someplace that is potentially an hour drive away, they can tuition into Easton for a much lower rate, and that could potentially be revenue generating. So any growth that is seen in the district now is done under this type of model where we're trying to create opportunities for our children, but also for our finances for the future.
So just to summarize what we've gone through at this point in time, I believe this budget represents some fiscal management, disciplined fiscal management, and reduces our overall spending, obviously. But in short, it restores alignment, maintains staffing on current projections, and positions the district on stable financial footing. I understand that there are variables that could influence or impact the budget as we move into 27. For example, special education, out-of-district placements, and transportation, all the things we've discussed. It's important, again, to point out this budget is very lean and contains very little contingency funding for unexpected student need. We're able to do this because we have some limited reserves that can be accessed next year if needed. I just want to express again that they're not a long-term fix. They're just a one-time, will get us through FY27, and then when we come before you for 28, we'll have a solid financial base that we can move forward with proper numbers as to why or why not we need to either increase or level. So I think that's important to point out. Some considerations. Before we close, I just wanted to highlight a few important considerations and timeframes this budget, the timeframe of this budget decision, what lies ahead. For FY27, override options were reviewed and discussed with the school committee. Based on the current proposal, there are no projected reductions to staffing or programs next year. Given that, in recognition of the broader needs across the town, particularly staffing shortages in public safety, the recommendation was made to forego any override this year. That said, it's important to be clear this decision does not eliminate any underlying structural funding issues. Looking ahead, the district remains highly dependent on several external factors like state funding formula and minimum aid levels, continued support for programs from programs like Circuit Breaker, and overall stability and grant funding. If those areas do not improve, future options may become more difficult and could include the need for an override, additional budget reductions, or continued use of revolving funds which are limited and not sustainable for the long term. So while the decision reflects current financial positions and priorities of the town, it also reinforces that long-term challenges remain and will remain for some time.
I believe for a moment it's important to address the fact that we are very aware that there has been a sentiment of displeasure and frustration from people, staff members, families even, that we are foregoing an option for an override this year. And they are correct when they say that class sizes have increased, that caseloads have increased, including for administrators, that we have limited office hours to service the public. Most notably, we had to forego refilling our Director of Equity and Inclusion, which is a seminal point in our strategic plan for our students and for our community. However, when looking at all factors, we are not at a point that you have heard this evening from police and fire. We are not at a point where I can say that staff members are unsafe going to work. With that said, I do need to highlight the frustration with staff members when morale for educators across the country is at an all-time low in general. It is asking once again that they do more with less, and that is not sustainable forever. In fact, we are reaching breaking points in certain areas. I alluded in the beginning to those clubs and activities. While we don't see the numbers of the paid clubs and activities potentially decreasing, we are seeing things that are on a voluntary basis that people just aren't able to physically, emotionally, psychologically give that much time because they're using so much extra time to meet the needs of the students on their increased caseloads in their classrooms, the unfunded mandates that keep coming down from the state. And so it is very important to acknowledge that the success in this district for a very long time has been because of the qualified staff and the extraordinary strides that they take. This does not mean that they have taken a step back by choice or that they are no longer committed to their work. They're just literally at a breaking point. And so we are going to see some reductions in service, not necessarily from reductions in staff, but just from reductions in capacity. However, I also want to note that, as the chiefs noted earlier, we do work very closely with our colleagues at the town level, and we benefit greatly from their response. We are responsible for almost 4,000 people in a very small condensed area, beautiful area, but a small condensed area every single day. We have frequent medical emergencies, accidents, mental health needs. We have facilities needs. We have inspections that need to be done. We work with them with our crisis team, all of our drills to make sure that the staff is ready in the event of emergencies. we make great use of those departments, and fortifying those departments, as well as the DPW that keeps our buildings safe for us and comfortable for everyone as much as possible, that is a direct benefit to the school department. So we certainly understand the frustration, but we also understand our responsibility to maintaining the services that our children and our staff members receive every day, and that will benefit the town as a whole. But we don't want to underestimate that it doesn't decrease the town revenue issues that have continued, and that will ultimately come to a head in the school department, as you're seeing elsewhere. But when you're talking about, limited capacity for taxpayers, and you're talking about limited funds to go around, we did not make the decision lightly to make the recommendation to the school committee, and the school committee did not take the recommendation lightly to vote to forego the override. And I just think those are important notations to make. And I also just want to make sure that people are aware that we are still really focusing on the other drivers that put Easton at a disadvantage. We're not just leaning on taxpayers. We were on Beacon Hill last week, meeting with legislators, talking about our priorities, both our budget priorities and our legislative priorities, and people often ask what they can support. Fixing the foundation formula is first and foremost for us. It is flawed. Every legislator will tell you they know it's flawed, but there is not a fix for that yet. We need to equalize what Easton receives. I'll show you some slides later to give you a better picture of that. Also, minimum aid. We do not get the funds from the Student Opportunity Act that my superintendent colleague spoke of earlier. We rely on minimum aid. And as I said, statutorily, that's a $30 per student a year increase. With inflation the way it is, and all of the escalating costs that we're all facing, that citizens are facing, we're pushing to make sure that that stays at $150 and increases. There's also an inflation cap in there that we're trying to make sure doesn't continue to handicap the system when inflation outpaces it on a regular basis. We are also looking to be sure that the circuit breaker for special education is fully funded. Again, from a regulation perspective, they have 75% reimbursement over a certain cap. It has often gone under 75%. We and my colleagues, both on the school committee organizations and superintendent organizations, believe that should be closer to 90%, and the transportation costs as well. And also the free meals. That is subject to appropriation every year. And so, people feel as though it's very comforting that that is there and that it will be there into perpetuity. But all of these things, even though they're driven by regulation, are pending appropriation. And when the state doesn't have the funding to provide it, it goes away, sometimes unexpectedly, and the school department has to pick up on that. So these are all things that we're fighting really hard for, to try to change the legislation that drives these strains on the budget, and also advocating for things in the budget, like from the Fair Tax Act. I'll also note, while we don't benefit from regional transportation, the superintendent also mentioned that it would benefit the regional school department, which of course would have an impact on the overall budget. So these are some really important drivers that any citizen can advocate for. They can just contact us. We're talking to our delegation regularly, providing testimony regularly, and we will continue to do that. We don't want anyone to think we're just relying on the taxpayers. We understand that these other funding sources need to be rectified as well.
So we are continuously looking ahead. We're actually looking ahead to FY28 now that FY27's budget hopefully will be passed and will be in the books. We can start to work towards FY28. We're going to continue to monitor our grant situation, obviously, special education costs and enrollment trends, and future contract obligations. I'm putting systems in place now that'll keep that monitored, build that history for us, so moving forward we'll have more accurate data to work towards. And then for the next slide, I'll change over to you.
So the next couple of slides are just how I end this every year because the situation hasn't changed since I've been in Easton. This has to do with what we receive for per pupil expenditure. As a footnote, I do want to say a lot of people have misunderstood this slide to mean that every time a student moves into the district, it means that we have to pay $18,000 extra. This data is from FY24 because it lags behind the current school year. Not to be macabre, but the analogy I tend to use is this is not sort of a physical, this is sort of a post-mortem assessment. This doesn't say if a student moves in, it's going to cost us $18,000. What it does is it measures what we received, and then it divides it by the number of students we had in that year. So the reason I say that is because one of the huge drivers in what a school district receives in order to educate children is enrollment. And a lot of times in participating in town meeting or different projects that happen in the community, there's often a sentiment that if housing develops, especially housing apartments or areas with dense populations, that will put an inordinate strain on the school department. It's actually the opposite. It would actually greatly benefit the school department financially and in other ways. We are in the business of children and welcome as many children as possible. But from a straight financial perspective, it would be a great benefit to any school district to increase the enrollment of a school department. And so I just want to make sure I explain this, the premise of what a per pupil expenditure is, but it is a good way, it's a good apples to apples representation of us to other districts. Because the Department of Education puts these figures together the same for everyone. And what you'll see here is that Easton is from the third in the bottom in our DART communities. DART is the districts that the Department of Education chooses to compare Easton with in terms of our achievement. And so we out-achieve many of these districts in multiple areas, whether it's what we offer academically, how our students achieve academically, how our students succeed in the arts and extracurriculars and sports and so on. And we do it third from the bottom in relation to those districts that we are compared to. So when we say we're doing more with less, we are achieving more with less resources. In fact, if we were to...
I'm actually glad you put that up there because one of my questions was going to be, we opened this night tonight with Southeastern Regional, and I was floored to hear that we as a town pay 20 out of the $24,000 per pupil that we send our kids, when we send our kids there, but yet we're only paying. My math was a $50 million budget with 3,300 kids. It's like $15,000 per kid.
Well, this includes, thank you for saying that, the reason that this is more on this slide is because it's apples to apples comparison. It includes things like health insurance and benefits, which is on the town side of the budget, but not every town is like that. Sometimes it's in the school budget. So that's how you can make sure that this is equitable across districts.
In Southeastern Tech doesn't have anywhere near the special education needs that a public school has.
Well, that is a function of the foundation formula. So the foundation formula assigns a cost to educate every child, including the difference between educating a pre-K child, educating a child in the 5th grade, educating a child in a vocational school or a comprehensive high school. And there are 7 or 8 indicators of poverty, each receiving a different amount of money. And it is, as we assert, it is flawed in its totality, and so that's why we're asking the legislature to take another look at it.
And just to add one more thing too, the per pupil cost also represents all funding sources. The budget we're asking for is just our operating budget, the $50 million.
Good point.
This takes into account revolving funds, every expenditure that happens from any other source and how much it applies to the kids.
And then the other comparison we typically use, we use DART because that's who the department compares us to for achievement. But then we also use our neighboring districts because, is that on here? Sorry, it's a little far away. Yes, these are our neighboring districts, sorry. And the reason why that is important is obviously we are competing for resources and we are competing for qualified staff with our immediate neighbors. And you can see here, we are second from the bottom on this. The other thing I want to point out on the prior slide, as well as this one, is where the state is. We never use the state as a metric when we are talking about our achievement levels. Our goal is to always be far exceeding the state. We don't take pride in just exceeding the state. But again, we're doing it with far less funds. And the same is true here. You see the second from the left is the state. The point here is that if we were even to get the funding of our next achieving or the border district with the next increased amount of per pupil spending, it's nothing to do with Stoughton as a entity. It's just that they happen to be the town to the left of us achieving,
Receiving more.
it's a little late, receiving more than Easton. If we were even not to get to the state average, if we were just to move over one level to what Stoughton is receiving, for example, that would be $1,883 per pupil per year, which would be a difference of $6.38 million per year. So we are achieving what Easton is, and arguably exceeding in many areas, with $6 million less per year. If we were to receive the state average, that would be a difference of almost $16.5 million to the school department. And I think most people would agree that we have a well-rounded program in Easton. We have amazing arts and performing arts and academics and a wide range of activities and social events and buildings that are really state-of-the-art. And we're doing all of that with the support of the taxpayers, of course, certainly with our building projects, because that helps us divert that funding to operational needs. I know, again, it is frustrating for some people that we have building projects when we have operating needs, but there's a direct correlation. We were literally losing many, many hundreds of thousands of dollars every year on reactive repairs, mitigation for dangerous chemicals in our buildings, and now we can divert that to the operating budget. So it's actually helped us sustain our programming for the amount of time that we have. And so we're greatly appreciative of that. I can't even begin to tell you, we would be in the stratosphere if we had a portion of the $16.46 million here. So while the town should take pride in the talent of the students, the hard work, and the dedication of the staff, again, we can only really take advantage of that for so long. And we do see a breaking point in many areas, especially where it's become a very challenging profession in the country. Never mind just in Easton, under these conditions, without a lot of the resources, materials, and wages that these professionals deserve and certainly want to receive and could get elsewhere. We are happy to answer any questions at this point.
Good.
I really appreciate the focus on alignment and bringing things back to look for a baseline. And you talked a lot about opportunities to look at revenue, bring in revenue. As Arthur pointed out earlier, being nimble, being creative, there's a lot of that in here as well. So that's all really positive. One thing is it's more geared to anybody listening at home. It's almost a false sense of relief that comes from saying, oh, there's no request this year for extra money. There's no override ask. Last year was a really hard year for our community. This year we have that space to breathe, and I'm worried that looking at the data, I would say 28, 29, things get really dicey again, especially if there's so many big balls in the air that I just dread thinking about another year like 26 being so close. And it doesn't feel like we have a lot of that buffer and contingency. And it's important to build the baseline, but
I'm just trying to reconcile that and also prepare anybody listening for, like, this doesn't mean the schools are in a good spot right now. It means that we're kind of recalibrating.
Yes.
But there's a story on the other side of this that's not good.
We do appreciate you punctuating that because the positions that we had, they were not gratuitous. They weren't just in the budget for no reason. Many of them we had built quite a long time to get to the point where we did have best practices in the district. And people want to see those positions come back. And we agree with them. They are important, they're necessary for our continuation of our achievement in the district. But we also understand the needs elsewhere. But to Director Spagna's point, you know, we're dipping into things like reserve funds that are finite. And it is very, we don't have reserve funds in the school department, revolving accounts and grants that, again, are more unpredictable than ever. And so it is important to note that, because if you do see a very big difference next year, we really don't want it to come as a surprise. But we do know how important it is to fortify things like public safety and our facilities.
Thank you.
Dr. Rawl, we started tonight just talking about the importance of children and educating children and creating productive members of society. I am one of those frustrated residents in Easton that we are not putting forth an override for the schools this year, because this was a difficult year. It was very difficult coming into it. You've managed amazingly well, as have the staff, but there are those breaking points, and those aren't going away. It's going to get worse. So while you've done an amazing job to get us to where we are this year, and your fellow department heads must be absolutely thrilled that you continue to look out for them as they look out for you, but this creates issues that we're kicking the can down the road again.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm frustrated. I'm frustrated because I know the size of the classes that my kids are, in today, and I know what these teachers are dealing with and the workload they're dealing with. And to your point, the bandwidth is not there to do so much of the incredible volunteer and extra work they were doing prior, and they want to be doing today. But their hands are tied because they're working extremely hard to make this work with the means that we've given them. And so I'm disappointed because I think everybody really needs to prioritize this, just as we are our public safety and public works. We need to be prioritizing our schools and our children, the future, right? I mean, we all know this, but somehow we kind of forget it. And at the federal level, we couldn't be going faster backwards. And if you could just say, well, let's spend an additional 1.5 trillion this year on education, but instead we're cutting it out. And we're saying, let's take more federal tools away, which is absolutely going backwards as fast as we possibly can. And you used an analogy in the last couple of years that I really like. I'm a veteran, by the way, spent 11 years in the military. And so I want that to shed some weight on the pace that we're going backwards. But it is like an aircraft carrier. When you start to turn that thing around, it takes time. And when we start to lose talent like we did this past year, a lot of talent, you don't just hire them back. It takes 10 years to build back these programs that you worked so hard to get us out in front of and to make this the incredible school district that it is. So I personally want to thank you, especially as you go on to the next chapter of your life. It's been an absolute pleasure working with you. I'm going to miss you. I know that Ms. Pruitt, and soon to be Dr. Pruitt, I think you're walking. Doctor, it's official. Dr. Pruitt, so congratulations. Excited to be working with you because you've been involved and you know these challenges. And Joe, great to have you on board as well. So that I have optimism, but at the same time, I wish we were bringing the schools along at the same pace and at the same time.
Understood.
Thank you.
Mr. Allen.
On the other side.
Yes.
Go for it.
Dr. Quall, thank you so much for your service to our students and for everything that you've done throughout your tenure here. I know at these hearings, per se, I always have like tons and tons of questions. I do appreciate that you have been very consistent since I've been here over the years presenting the budget to us. And so you always start off with a really good framework to make it feel like this is what it should be. These are the levels that we straddle throughout the school year. So you will be missed at the end of the school year. I do have a question though, that said. The $500,000 that we are prepaying, is that required, or can we put that in the fund, or the 250K fund that we have at Town Hall, or is there another savings that we found that was then here that's prepaid for next year?
It's a very good question.
It's part of the excess funding that we found with the salary lines.
Okay.
It is something we need to do because I built the FY27 budget on that prepayment happening.
Okay.
We did prepay last year, though, for this year.
You did.
Yes.
So it's a continuation of that.
Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you, and welcome.
Thank you.
I will add, you will also be very missed. It has been my absolute pleasure of my life to serve this district. It's wonderful. And I thank you all for your support.
I got 8 months out of it.
You all set now?
We have to offer it up to the public if there's anyone from the public.
I don't see anybody from the public other than our employees.
All right, well, with that, we have all the information that we talked about tonight is available on our website, easton.ma.us/budget, and then specific information about the operation override is available at Easton.
Committee vote to adjourn the meeting.
Could I have everyone's favorite motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. We're going to do the same thing. So,
Yeah.
motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
That's Mr. Stebbins.
Second.
Okay, Stacy, all in favor? Thank you all. And thank you all.
Thank you all.
For being here.
At ECAT, we're here to keep you connected and involved in the community. On ECAT, you can explore the town with Gail Devins.
Hello, I'm Gail Devins, and welcome to our show, Discover Easton.
Tell your story with Harrison Young on Topic Time.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Topic